My name is Eileen Collins, and I'm an Air Force Lieutenant Colonel. I'm currently training to fly on STS-63, which is a space shuttle flight scheduled for February of 1995. We've never had a woman fly in the right seat of the space shuttle as a space shuttle pilot. Well, as a shuttle pilot, we need to keep up our proficiency in between shuttle flights and before our first shuttle flight. Predominantly, we fly the T-38. We fly about, 10 times a month. I'm keeping your hands on the stick and throttles. When I first decided I wanted to be an astronaut, it was such a far-off, wild dream. I was embarrassed to tell anybody that I wanted to do it. Of course, back then, as a youngster, there were only men astronauts.
NASA 913, after this pattern, we'll be requesting departure to the local area.
913, roger.
Whenever we say we want some astronauts, we get hundreds and hundreds, even thousands of applicants. It's easy to go fishing in a pool that's this deep. You know, we pick 20 or 25 every couple of years. Are superb individuals. Maverick isn't exactly what you want, and you don't want a computer nerd or something. You don't want somebody that's very, very good in just one subject and not broad. So what we look for is somebody who is, of course, intelligent and willing to work hard and, in fact, subvert their own desires for somebody else's, because in many cases you carry somebody else's science up into orbit and do their work. Somebody who can get along in a team situation and behave pretty well in an emergency. In airplanes, the convenient thing is, though, you can put an instructor pilot in with a pilot and you can go putzing around the countryside and learn how to do things. Spaceflight is still so expensive, you can't do that. You can't send a rookie into orbit because of the time and the expense. So we try to recreate the environment on the ground.
Now, when we do the simulator training, we have an astronaut crew in the actual simulator itself. We have a training crew, which is down at the console, and they have a script that they have written ahead of time on a list of malfunctions that they're going to input into the simulator. And then we have flight controllers over in mission control, and they don't know what kind of malfunctions are coming. And the astronaut crew doesn't know what's coming.
Okay, we're in flight control room 1. We're about to start an integrated simulation. We're about to launch Discovery.
Copy, lift.
Oh,
Roger, roll, Discovery.
So what you do is you launch, and you immediately start getting malfunctions. And what the pilot needs to do, and the commander and the mission specialist, is identify what is wrong. And that's difficult.
Cabin leaks going in.
Left engine helium leak.
Holler when you're out of the...
This is for Eileen. We see a leak on the left engine helium. Go for the procedure.
In training, they pound on us incessantly. But after a while, you even get used to an environment where there are 20 or 30 malfunctions an hour coming at you, and you get used to it.
Discovery Houston, main engine limits inhibit. Stuck in the bucket.
Cannot simulate that pressure, and the way we make up for it in training is to put in a large number of problems, which leads to the same kind of feelings of pressure that you get on a real flight day when maybe one thing's not working exactly right.
We're on one IMU
Right now.
See it close out. Yeah. It's starting to clean up a little now. It's not looking too bad. Now they survived at this more, let's let them land.
Crews come back laughing. They say if you can survive the simulators, the spaceflight itself is a dream.
Trying to keep up with the vehicle that's going about Mach 25, and our brains are only about Mach 23, so we were scrambling.
Oh, it's better than a workout at the gym.
The Johnson Space Center is the place that astronauts live and work. It's the place where people prepare for the missions, where the astronauts are trained, where the missions are simulated, and ultimately when the orbiter is in space, where the missions are controlled.
At 11:50, we think the engine will go down at 4 minutes.
Fido standing by for performance call.
First row of consoles, people are going to be mostly worrying about the trajectory of the orbiter, where it's going, and if we're making the places in space we've got to get to. The second row of consoles is mostly going to be worrying about the systems on board the spacecraft. The third row is mostly going to be concerned with the command of the vehicle, sending the commands, the flight director, and overall decision, and the Capcom communicating with the crew. Back here, the people in the hot seat are going to be the boosters. They're going to be monitoring the main engines, and the hydraulics officers on the other side of that.
Go for 2 fans and add bay 1.
Discovery Houston, you go for the 2 fans, and how do you hear me on this transmission?
Being a flight director is just hours and hours of boredom interspersed with moments of stark terror.
I wish they had done that. They took the bus down for us.
Most of the time, everything goes very well. But then there are those moments where suddenly, and very unexpectedly, you're in a situation where your performance has ultimate consequences.
Houston, and we're looking at control CA2 down.
Just one, sorry.
Not a good sign.
Ever since Isaac Newton, researchers have studied gravity by watching things fall. Centuries later, they can still do it at a high-tech NASA facility. CNN's Al Hinman reports on the ups and downs of space research.
On the free fall down, bungee jumpers share something with astronauts in space, a feeling of weightlessness. Woo! Space scientists achieve a similar effect as they defy gravity by dropping experiments in an 8-story tall free fall.
3, 2, 1.
The United States space program was in its infancy when scientists at NASA's Lewis Research Center began using the drop tower. Over 4 decades, there have been more than 12,000 gravity-defying drops.
In this facility, we take experiments and we let them fall through some distance. And while they're falling, the relative gravitational effects are removed from the experiment. They experience what is called free fall.
That free fall achieves the equivalent of nearly zero gravity before the container hits an airbag.
We're able to achieve levels of approximately 1/1,000,000th of normal gravity.
Drop. But that so-called microgravity effect lasts only 2.2 seconds in the drop tower. Researchers can double that time in another facility, where experiments can be dropped down a 52-story below-ground shaft, landing in shock-absorbing plastic beads.
Voltage and capacitor.
The experiment these scientists designed tests the combustion of different fuels in microgravity. Total time needed for burn, about 1 second.
Oh, incredible. That's incredible.
Eliminating the effect of gravity helps scientists study what happens when fuels burn on Earth and in space. Many of the NASA experiments are aimed at producing improved rocket designs and fuels. Many of the experiments conducted on the Space Shuttle get their start at the Lewis Research Center drop tower. After a lot more testing, this experiment is headed for space aboard a shuttle mission in 1997. A different combustion experiment is set to go up on a shuttle mission in February. For the 8th time, a small piece of paper will be burned in the microgravity of space. The continuing experiment is helping scientists better understand how fires burn here on Earth.
So that experiment graduated from the simplest facility here in the drop tower all the way to flying on the shuttle.
These young researchers hope their simple experiments might make the same journey down to get up into space.
Über den großen Teich nach Amerika. Dort findet derzeit in Dallas in Texas ein Meteorologenkongress statt, wo über 2000 Meteorologen aus aller Welt zusammenkommen. Und wie ist das Wetter dort? Es hat geschüttet wie aus Kübeln, und zwar aus diesen Wolken gab es gestern heftige Gewitter. Naja, Meteorologen sind eben auch nur Menschen, müssen das nehmen, das Wetter nehmen, wie es kommt. Ihnen noch einen schönen Abend. Tschüss.
January 28, 1986, Cape Canaveral. All eyes are on the Shuttle Challenger as it lifts off.
Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
But the Challenger never made it to orbit. The faces, once smiling, turned to amazement, then disbelief, then horror. June Scobie was near the launch pad, and she remembers the horror of seeing her husband die.
My family and the families of the Challenger crew shared that traumatic time in our life with everyone around the world. We were viewing the loss of our loved ones as that space shuttle exploded and streams of smoke and fragments of the shuttle fell back to the Earth.
Dick Scobie commanded the Challenger's last flight, but June's fellow classroom teacher, Krista McAuliffe, was also aboard.
Youngsters are waiting to hear lessons from a beloved classroom teacher, and Krista, the teacher on board, had been my friend, and we'd worked together on the lessons that she was going to teach in space, as well as she had been in my classroom curious about being a college professor. So we'd grown to be friends.
Getting over the grief was made harder by all the publicity about Challenger.
Just about the time we were getting over a loss, as someone normally would, then there would be a new news break with they found the bodies at the bottom of the ocean, or they found new fragments of the shuttle, or they had a new story about the disaster. So that energy is there that you used for anger or bitterness or trauma and loss in your life. And I had to funnel that energy in a new direction.
The new direction became the Challenger Center for Science Education, founded a year after the disaster to teach children about science by letting them operate a spaceship, either in a mission control room on the ground or on the simulated flight deck of a space station.
And I think that the families realized that we had an idea that would help all of us. It would help us to have something very positive to talk about, rather than continuing to focus on the past and the negative and the loss.
Mission Control, this is Space Station.
The centers teach teamwork, science, mathematics, and the ability to solve problems by working together. And without the Challenger disaster, the Challenger Center would never have happened.
Well, there's not anything else out there like it now, so I wouldn't imagine so. Perhaps that crew, in their death, has left us something that would not have been had it not been for them and that unique mission that they were on.
John Holloman, CNN, Washington.
The next shuttle mission will feature a close encounter with the Russian space station Mir. It's the first step toward building a permanent international post in space.
At this hour, we have the Thursday forecast for Europe, the Middle East, Africa, North America, beginning with Europe over the last several hours. American continent, snowy weather from Quebec into the Maritimes of Canada, extreme northern New England in the U.S., and the wet weather will continue across the northwestern U.S. as well. Have a good day. I'm meteorologist Valerie Voss.
And also, the U.S. Space Shuttle Discovery is poised to head towards a historic rendezvous. We'll have details. U.S. Space Shuttle Discovery is being readied for liftoff Thursday from Cape Canaveral, Florida. The shuttle is to give the world a close-up look at Russia's Mir space station, and it'll prepare for a planned shuttle docking with the station in June. Veteran Russian cosmonaut Vladimir Titov will be on board the U.S. craft. The mission will also include the first woman to pilot a shuttle and the first African-American to walk in space. Weather permitting, the Discovery is scheduled to lift off at 5:48 GMT Thursday. CNN International plans to carry the launch live.
The U.S. Space Shuttle Discovery had been scheduled for liftoff shortly before 1 a.m. on Thursday, Florida time, but a navigational unit failed its pre-flight tests, and NASA postponed the launch after considering the problem. The Discovery crew includes a Russian, and its mission includes an unprecedented close approach to the Russian Mir space station. The shuttle will also be piloted by a woman for the first time.
In the countryside of Australia, a radio telescope began sweeping the skies today, searching for a message from the stars. It's the tool that drives a study called Project Phoenix. The idea is that television and radio transmissions on Earth travel on through space. And if anyone out there is listening, they may try to contact us. The telescope is searching for that message. To find out more about all this, we're joined from our bureau in San Francisco by John Billingham. He is a senior scientist for Project Phoenix with the SETI Institute in California. SETI stands for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Dr. Billingham, welcome. Let me play devil's advocate first. Are you serious?
Okay.
Are you serious about this?
Absolutely serious. For many years now, scientists have believed that the phenomenon of life is in fact widespread in the universe. And the next question, of course, is to see if we can detect it in any way. And we do think some of that life is intelligent, maybe even far beyond us. So we have adopted a search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI.
What exactly are you looking for? What will tell you that there is something out there?
What we're looking for is radio signals. As you know, we transmit radio signals from the Earth, and these leak out all the time into space. Now, it's possible that the other civilizations may be doing exactly the same thing, in which case we might be able to detect their signals after they've traveled for many years across the vast distances of space, or indeed, they might send them out deliberately to try and attract our attention.
Dr. Billingham, does it take someone who's committed to the idea that there is intelligence out there somewhere to be involved in this project?
I think that's fair to say. I think most of us have gone through the scientific evidence, and it's fairly clear to us that the number of possible sites for intelligence in our galaxy alone, and of course in the rest of the universe, is astonishingly high. There are 400 billion stars in our own Milky Way galaxy, and we now believe that most of these stars have planets. It only takes a tiny fraction of those planets to be something like our Earth for life to be spawned just as it was here, and then to evolve perhaps to intelligence.
What will it take to convince you and convince others that in fact there is intelligence out there? How will we interpret the signs?
Well, the critical test, of course, is to detect with our Project Phoenix search real signals coming from very far away that are fixed on the sky that are indeed being transmitted by another civilization. To do this takes extremely sophisticated equipment. We have developed this over the years, and it is now down in Australia, hooked up to the Parkes radio telescope, which is a huge radio telescope down there, and we are working jointly with the Australians to carry out a 5-month search of the southern sky for signals of intelligent origin.
Dr. Billingham, I don't mean to be cynical, but I don't recall seeing Project Phoenix in the Republican contract with America. How are you going to deal with critics who say this is a waste of money?
Well, for many years, our SETI search was funded by NASA and approved by the Congress, and we did develop a lot of the technology that we're now using. In 1993, the Congress canceled that program, so the funding is now being provided from private sources, from individual donors who have the vision and imagination to see the wonderful prospects for this search.
How do you convince people that this money is well spent, that this is all worth the effort and the cash?
Well, it seems to me that there are a lot of answers to that, all the way from being the most exciting scientific discovery of all time, perhaps, to learning about the achievements of a civilization which has gone beyond us in their own achievements and their own social structure. We have to remember that the signal may be coming from a civilization which is perhaps 10 million years in advance of us or older than us, in which case, of course, we will learn for the first time that it is possible to achieve stability and longevity. And I think everyone, whatever their interest in life, would be fascinated to know how the other civilization has done that and what their achievements are.
We have less than a minute. In fact, what are you talking about when you describe an intelligent civilization out there someplace? What might it be?
Well, of course, we can't tell exactly. All we know is that they are likely to use the same sorts of technology and the same sorts of knowledge about astronomy that we have now. And if indeed they are transmitting, then we have now arrived at a stage in our own evolution here on Earth for the first time ever that we can, in fact, given the right amount of support and given the right ingenuity in building sophisticated signal detection systems, to actually pick up that faint whisper from another world.
Dr. Billingham, we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
If all goes according to plan, the Space Shuttle Discovery will lift off from Florida's Kennedy Space Center in about 9 hours. The 8-day mission includes several firsts, including a Russian cosmonaut as part of the crew, the first spacewalk by an African-American, and the first woman pilot. Discovery is also scheduled to maneuver within 30 feet of Russia's Mir space station. CNN will have live coverage of Discovery's launch scheduled for Friday at 12:22 a.m. Eastern Time, 5:22 GMT.
Suited up and ready to go, 22 minutes and counting. Will the Space Shuttle Discovery make it off the ground this time? As the final countdown for the Space Shuttle Discovery fast approaches, please stay with us for more coverage.
Snowstorm is winding up across the eastern seaboard, going to bring big changes over the weekend.
Hi, it's John Holloman at CNN Center in Atlanta. We're going to take you live to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where the countdown clock is ticking off the final 2 minutes and 12 seconds before launch for Space Shuttle Discovery. Inside, the first woman to pilot a U.S. spaceship, Eileen Collins, is at the controls, along with Commander Jim Weatherby. What you're looking at is a hydrogen vent cap being lifted off the top of the space shuttle so that it can leave on schedule just under 2 minutes from now. Mike Foale, who may be the top computer expert in the astronaut corps, is seated between the pilot and commander as flight engineer. Down below in the middeck, Bernard Harris, the payload commander, thinking about making history next week as the first African-American to ever make a spacewalk. He and Mike Foale will hand carry a 2,800-pound satellite around in the cargo bay. That's part of an experiment to prove that astronauts will be able to connect huge segments of the space station starting in a couple of years. Janice Voss is the expert on the Space Hab Laboratory down in the cargo bay. She's operated experiments there in the past, and along on his first shuttle ride is Russian cosmonaut Vladimir Titov. He's taking along a small two-way radio, sort of like a handheld citizens band radio, to communicate with the Russian Mir space station when the two ships rendezvous. The Mir meeting will be probably the highlight of this mission. It will happen in about 3 days. Commander Weatherby will steer Discovery to within 33 feet of the Russian space station and will fly around it for about an hour, taking the best pictures ever made of the Russian ship. You can probably see the countdown clock continue to tick off the final seconds before launch. We'll continue to watch and listen to NASA commentator George Diller.
Standing by to hand off now to the onboard flight computers. We have a handoff. Discovery's computers now controlling.
5.
Solid rocket booster nozzles being gimbaled. T-minus 18 seconds. Solid rocket boosters armed. Sound suppression water system activated.
10.
T-minus 10 seconds. Go for main engine start. Main engines now started. Main engines up and running. 3, 2, 1, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Discovery on a mission to prepare for the next era of world cooperation in space.
Hello, program Houston.
Roger, roll, Discovery. Houston is now controlling Discovery on its 20th trip to space. Discovery rolling on course for an orbit with the Mir space station. Mir currently half a world away above the Indian Ocean. Three engines on Discovery now throttling down to 2/3 throttle to prepare the spacecraft to pass through the area of maximum air pressure and go supersonic. Discovery already traveling 700 miles per hour, 2 miles northeast of the launch pad, altitude 4 miles. Discovery, go at throttle up.
Go at throttle up.
3 engines on Discovery are now back at full throttle. Discovery speed is 1,100 miles per hour, 8 nautical miles above the launch pad, 6 nautical miles northeast of Kennedy Space Center. One and a half minutes since launch, Discovery's already burned more than 2.25 million pounds of propellant and weighs less than half of what it did at launch. Discovery's altitude now 17 nautical miles, 15 nautical miles northeast of the Kennedy Space Center. Discovery traveling 2,800 miles per hour. Flight controllers standing by for burnout and jettison of the twin solid rockets.
If you're living anywhere in the eastern one-third of the United States and there are no clouds in the eastern sky, you might want to go outside right now because you'll probably be able to see the shuttle as it speeds up in a northeasterly direction toward its rendezvous with the Russian Mir space station. People who have been outside for these night launches on the East Coast in the past when they've gone in this direction have said it's a spectacular sight, something like a shooting star. The shuttle is traveling at 2,800 miles an hour right now, so if you live between Washington, D.C. and, say, Atlanta, Georgia, you might want to get outside in a hurry because it's going to go past pretty quickly. Further up north, you'll have a couple more minutes to get out and see what's going on. The launches at night are always described as the most beautiful by people on the ground at the Kennedy Space Center watching them, and for those of us here and you at home watching, you couldn't help but notice how pretty this thing was as it lifted off, all the red and yellow and orange of the shuttle as it went off into space. There are a lot of things going on this mission that we were talking about before the shuttle successfully launched. Let me tell you about a couple more. In addition to the Mir rendezvous, there will be dozens of experiments in the Space Hab module, including medical crystal growth and production of high-quality contact lenses, which we are told will be able to be worn much longer than contact lenses manufactured on Earth. There's some rodents on this shuttle, and they will be used to determine effects of weightlessness on people and other mammals. There's a robot nicknamed Charlotte back in the space lab. It looks like a spider and can move about on a series of strings, sort of like a spider web. Charlotte has a TV camera eye, which can monitor experiments, and a hand, which can turn switches on and off. There's even a zero-gravity Coke machine aboard, which will make history by dispensing soft drinks during the mission. I think perhaps we've got a videotape now of the final few seconds of the launch that we can show you. Again, it was spectacular to watch. And we can just see what that launch looked like as we replay it for you at this moment.
We have a handoff. Discovery's computer's now controlling.
5.
Solid rocket booster nozzles being gimbaled. T-minus 18 seconds. Solid rocket boosters armed. Sound suppression water system activated.
10.
T-minus 10 seconds. Go for main engine start. Main engine's now started. Main engine's up and running. 3, 2, 1, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Discovery on a mission to prepare for the next era of world cooperation in space.
Hello, program Houston.
Roger, roll, Discovery. Houston is now controlling Discovery on its 20th trip to space. Discovery rolling on course for an orbit with the Mir space station. Mir currently half a world away above the Indian Ocean. Three engines on Discovery now throttling down to 2/3 throttle to prepare the spacecraft to pass through the area of maximum air pressure and go supersonic.
Wow, what a shot.
The shuttle astronauts are still not in their final orbit, but they will be in about 3 minutes from right now if all continues to go well. The solid rocket boosters were jettisoned a couple of minutes ago, which you saw live here on CNN. The astronauts will be in orbit for 8 days, and they'll have lots of experiments, some of which we'll be able to broadcast to you live, including a spacewalk and that rendezvous with the Mir space station, which will happen about Monday of next week. John Holloman, CNN reporting. Now stay with us for Moneyline, coming up next on CNN. And for international viewers, CNN World News.
This has been a CNN Live event.
The U.S. Space Shuttle Discovery has blasted into orbit in a picture-perfect launch. It's headed for a rendezvous with the Russian space station Mir. The highlight of the 8-day mission is expected to come when the shuttle, including a Russian cosmonaut, meets up with Mir on Monday.
Liftoff of Space Shuttle Discovery.
Am frühen Morgen startete die US-Raumfähre Discovery ins All. Neben 5 Amerikanern ist auch ein russischer Kosmonaut an Bord. Höhepunkt des 8-tägigen Aufenthalts im All. Die Discovery wird sich der russischen Raumstation Mir bis auf 10 Meter nähern und den Zustand der Station untersuchen.
Historischer Start ins All. Die amerikanische Raumfähre Discovery ist zu einer historischen Mission aufgebrochen. Erstmals ist einer der Space Shuttle-Piloten eine Frau. Und zum ersten Mal seit 20 Jahren ist ein russisch-amerikanisches Treffen im All vorgesehen.
Der nächtliche Start der Discovery war exakt geplant. Die Raumfähre musste zu einer ganz bestimmten Uhrzeit abheben, denn sie soll sich am Montag bis auf 10 Meter der russischen Raumstation Mir nähern. Kein leichtes Manöver übrigens. Immerhin ist die Discovery 28.000 Stundenkilometer schnell. Die Ingenieure zittern allerdings noch, ob das Rendezvous auch tatsächlich durchgeführt werden kann. Der Grund: kurz nach dem Start gab es Probleme an den Steuerdüsen. Erstmals am Steuer einer Discovery ist diesmal übrigens eine Frau.
Space Shuttle Discovery on a mission to prepare for the next era of world cooperation in space.
The U.S. Space Shuttle Discovery blasted off into orbit today for a 3-day mission that includes a rendezvous with Russia's Mir space station. As the trip began, Discovery experienced a leak in a steering thruster, but U.S. space officials say the leak is minor and, if it does not increase, should not affect the Discovery-Mir rendezvous.
An international crew of astronauts and 1 cosmonaut is streaking towards a rendezvous with the Russian space station Mir, but those aboard the U.S. Space Shuttle Discovery have plenty to do before they get a close-up view of the space station. Now, CNN's John Holloman is following this closely. John, what is the latest information on this rendezvous?
Well, NASA just did a briefing on the rendezvous a couple of minutes ago, Sonia, and they're not as optimistic that they're going to be able to get 30 feet away from the Mir as they were. You know, the problem has been all along this leaking thruster, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but I guess the bottom line is the optimism about the Monday rendezvous is not as high as it was. Before they took off, this veteran shuttle astronaut group said they were most excited about the chance to fly one more time. And this morning, as they were preparing for their first interview from space, you could see just how happy they are. Rookie astronaut, the only non-veteran, Eileen Collins, says her first launch 2 days ago was more than she expected.
Sort of what I expected, maybe a little more vibration and a little more acceleration than I thought ahead of time. But that was probably the most exciting part of the mission so far. And right now we're all just doing the flight plan and getting the ops done, getting the science done, and everything seems to be going pretty well.
Collins has taken the controls of the shuttle several times during the mission and, in fact, is steering it with rocket firings today. The experiments on board working pretty well, too. The commander says his crew's in good spirits, and except for that steering jet problem that just won't stop leaking, the mission is running like clockwork. Here's what that jet looks like as it spews about a half a pound of propellant into space every hour. And while it looks pretty, it's a possible threat to Monday's rendezvous with the Russian Mir space station.
I personally would be fairly disappointed. I'm looking forward to checking out the handling qualities of our vehicle and checking out the navigation system.
The Americans and the Russians are negotiating now on how close the shuttle will be allowed to get on Monday. If this leak were to stop by itself, then the rendezvous to 30 feet or 10 meters could go just about as planned. If it doesn't do that, then the Russians are going to have to be convinced that it won't damage their space station to get it that close. And so far today, we are told they are not convinced. So NASA is sending a lot of information, a lot of computer data across to the Russian Space Agency to try to bridge this gap and perhaps have that happen. The crew, by the way, used its Spartan satellite to study the shuttle from the end of the Canadian robot arm this morning. It's been studying the shuttle glow,
caused by the spaceship's speedy movement through space. Discovery is about 200 miles above the Earth right now, pretty high for a shuttle mission. And by Monday, it'll be 250 miles up, which is the same altitude as the Mir. NASA spokesman Kyle Herring is at the Russian Space Center in Kaliningrad, and he says the Russians continue to worry about the rendezvous in light of this leak. So that's about how things are. We'll, of course, be able to give our CNN International viewers a really good shot at finding out up-to-the-minute information and asking their own questions about this mission, in that we'll be doing a live interview tomorrow here on CNN International with the space shuttle. We'll talk to the pilot. We'll talk to the mission specialist, Janice Voss, who's been working on all these experiments and operating the robot arm, and we'll be talking to the Russian cosmonaut as well. So it's going to be very exciting, and we want our viewers to participate with us.
Well, the number was on the screen there. It's in America. It's 404-827-4056. John, I find it extraordinary that you can do an interview with space. How does that actually work?
It's an amazing thing. What we do here at CNN Center is we have a telephone line hookup that goes from here to NASA in Houston. The folks at NASA Houston have a lot of communications links with the shuttle. It goes up to them on one of their links, and then we listen to their reply, just like we get all the stuff we get from the space shuttle, just on the NASA television live downlink from space. And it seems pretty complicated, and we have a staff of people working, who've been working 3 or 4 days to make it work well for us tomorrow. And I think in the past when we've done it, it's worked very well. But I'm most excited about the fact that our viewers are going to get to participate in this. You know, we try a lot to bring the viewers into our coverage, and this will be fun. You'll get to talk to the people on board the space shuttle and let them answer the questions you have. So let us know what you want to know.
That's wonderful. John Holloman, thanks for joining us. For those questions, of course, the number is in America. It's 404-827-4056. Send your fax with your questions, and that interview should happen at about 12:15 GMT on Sunday. A robot arm was used to conduct an experiment with a satellite called Spartan. Other experiments were conducted inside the shuttle. The mission's highlight is scheduled for Monday. That's when Discovery is expected to rendezvous with the Russian space station Mir.
The Discovery astronauts are worried they may not be able to accomplish their primary mission, a close rendezvous with the Russian Mir space station. A leaking thruster at the rear of the shuttle may make a close rendezvous dangerous for the Russian ship.
There's lots of discussion going on. A lot of the contamination experts in the United States and in Russia have been discussing what the impacts of that would be to the space station or any hardware on the space station, and those discussions are ongoing and have not come to any final resolution.
The best that could happen is that the leak could stop and the 33-foot rendezvous would proceed. The worst, that the Russians refused to allow Discovery to get closer than 400 feet because of possible damage to Russian solar panels or other delicate equipment on their space station. Commander Jim Weatherby says he hopes he's not forced to stay away from the Russians.
Well, I personally would be fairly disappointed. I'm very looking forward to checking out the handling qualities of our vehicle and checking out the navigation system.
Shuttle pilot Eileen Collins was at the controls for Discovery's launch. The first woman shuttle pilot says she was surprised at how it felt.
Sort of what I expected, maybe a little more vibration and a little more acceleration than I thought ahead of time. But that was probably the most exciting part of the mission so far. And right now we're all just doing the flight plan and getting the ops done, getting the science done, and everything seems to be going pretty well.
The experiments so far include spewing metal balls and rods into space to make sure small objects can be tracked from the ground. And the Spartan ultraviolet satellite was hung over the side to look at the glow caused by the shuttle's movement through space. John Holloman, CNN reporting.
NASA says one of 2 thrusters or steering jets that was leaking is apparently back in working order now. The leaks threaten to delay or scrap Monday's long-awaited meeting between Discovery and Russia's Mir space station. Russia has expressed concern that the leak in fuel might damage Mir if Discovery comes too close. NASA engineers say in the worst-case scenario, Discovery will have to fly around Mir from a distance of about 400 feet.
Rendezvous in space. A U.S. shuttle meets a Russian space station. It's the dress rehearsal for a docking and a new era in space. Hello and welcome. I'm Miles O'Brien. It was the size of a basketball, weighed about 180 pounds, and as it hurtled around the globe, all it could do was beep. Modest as it was, the Russian satellite Sputnik 1 sent much of the Western world into a Cold War tizzy when it was launched in October of 1957. The world remembers it as the moment the space race began. Well, we may one day mark the current Space Shuttle mission as the event which symbolizes the end of that race. No one won, but no one lost. And the competitors are now on the same team.
Liftoff of Space Shuttle Discovery.
It's a rendezvous with the future of space exploration.
I think this mission is a signpost. It's a sign of the times.
It's a mission that stands out as the foundation.
So this is really the beginning of a whole new era.
On this mission, the crew of Space Shuttle Discovery plans to inch toward a close encounter with the Russian space station Mir. It's a dress rehearsal for a series of 7 Shuttle Mir dockings, which themselves are the rehearsals for construction of a permanent international space station.
Is the maneuver inherently dangerous?
I think it is not.
Weatherby will be the first to see how the shuttle handles in tight formation with the massive space station. The Russians are concerned Discovery's steering jets might contaminate or damage Mir's fragile solar panels. Weatherby is not.
I think we're going to find that it's very easy. We are going to find that we can control this 100-ton vehicle within inches of where we want it to go. It's a very good system. It flies better than the simulator.
NASA's astronauts are honing their docking skills on sophisticated simulators like this one at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. This is a mock-up of the aft flight deck of the Space Shuttle. The docking maneuver is not inherently unusual. In fact, the Space Shuttle was designed for this very purpose. Nevertheless, 2 ships of this size have never orbited the Earth in such close proximity. America's Apollo and Russia's Soyuz spaceships were much smaller.
Docking completed.
And when they met in space in July of 1975, the docking maneuver was not as gentle as the Russians wanted.
Glad to see you.
Conceived during a brief thaw in the Cold War, the Apollo-Soyuz docking mission was life imitating art.
Iron Man, a Russian spacecraft is making rendezvous with you.
The 1969 movie Marooned, where Russian cosmonauts help rescue some stranded U.S. astronauts, helped spark the joint project. A year later, an explosion aboard Apollo 13 underscored each side's desire to have the equipment and the experience to launch a real rescue mission.
It was a little, I guess the word might be spooky to think about first place going there, in the second place.
Glenn Lunny was NASA's project director for Apollo-Soyuz. He says the current partnership with the Russians, with its loftier goals and leaner budgets, poses some challenges which he never faced 20 years ago.
The currency in the 70s perhaps was pride. There still is a currency of pride that's being operated on today, but in addition to that, I think the other currency is money, and that will complicate the relationship.
And each partner has reason to doubt the other's ability to come through. While the U.S. frets over Russia's political and economic turmoil, the Russians wonder about congressional support for NASA.
I think that the Russians probably are more apprehensive about the Americans falling down on the deal than we are about them. After all, they've actually been doing it, and we've just been talking about it.
For 2 decades, the Russians have kept space stations in orbit. Mir has logged more than 50,000 orbits since it was launched in 1986.
We can learn from them, and they can learn from us. So this is really the beginning of a whole new era of relations with, the U.S. and Russia.
With a $30 billion price tag, the International Space Station Alpha is clearly too big a project for even the U.S. and Russia working together. Europe, Japan, and Canada are also partners.
Every country can have own space program, and they can to do anything they want. But money, money.
Money, money. The lack of it has forced some spacefaring nations to work together. The joint venture won't be easy, but neither is the goal. The astronauts and the cosmonauts say the biggest challenge they face is the language barrier. The Russians confess to having an especially hard time learning NASA's long list of puzzling acronyms. Both sides are working to solve that problem ASAP.
The Space Shuttle's system of thrusters is threatening to ruin Monday's scheduled rendezvous with the Russian Mir space station. As the astronauts were test-firing thrusters Saturday afternoon, one started to leak a large amount of propellant. The leaky thruster and 2 others connected to the same fuel line had to be shut down to stop the leak. The Russians were worried about a single thruster leak, and NASA officials say they'll have to do even more convincing to get them to allow a rendezvous to within 33 feet of their delicate space station. The Russians say leaking thrusters could make a close rendezvous dangerous for their space station with its delicate solar panels.
There's lots of discussion going on. A lot of the contamination experts in the United States and in Russia have been discussing what the impacts of that would be to the space station or any hardware on the space station. And those discussions are ongoing and have not come to any final resolution.
Officials say the best that could happen is that the leaks could stop and the 33-foot rendezvous would proceed. And NASA hopes the worst that will happen is that the Russians refuse to allow Discovery to get closer than 400 feet because of possible damage. Shuttle Commander Jim Weatherby says he hopes he's not forced to stay away from the Russian ship.
Well, I personally would be fairly disappointed. I'm very looking forward to checking out the handling qualities of our vehicle and checking out the navigation system.
Joining us from the middeck of Space Shuttle Discovery are three members of the history-making crew. The first woman to pilot a shuttle, Eileen Collins, is joined by Janice Voss, the mission specialist in charge of the robot arm and many of the science experiments on board, and Vladimir Titov, the cosmonaut who holds the record for the longest duration spaceflight, having spent more than a year aboard the Russian Mir stations. Good to see you all today. CNN viewers from around the world have come up with questions for the three of you, and we'll get right to it, starting with Eileen Collins. Bring us up to date on the leaking thrusters. Our viewers know there's been a small leak in the rear and a larger one in the front, and that the big leak seems to have stopped. Tell us what you've been doing to solve these problems.
Well, we've got some good news for you. The leaky jet in the forward part of the orbiter was, the first time we tried to fire it, it started leaking. But the problem, or the leak itself, has sealed itself, and everything is normal on the front. The leak we had in the back began right after main engine cutoff, and the leak rate is gradually slowing down, and we hope by tomorrow the leak will be totally gone.
Great. From your seat in the cockpit, what do these leaks look like? And do they appear to you to cause any threat to the Russian space station if you were to get very close?
Well, every once in a while you'll see some very small, bright particles. It's hard for me to tell if it would cause any damage or not. It looks like everything dissipates once it gets maybe 20, 50 feet away. It seems to dissipate.
Uh-huh.
And it's hard to say right now, but what we're looking for is that this will be gone totally before we do the rendezvous.
Yeah, you and Commander Jim Weatherby have been planning for this rendezvous that would be 10 meters from Mir. If you're forced to rendezvous 100 meters away or 115 meters away, would it be any more difficult just because you practice this closer rendezvous more than these more distant approaches?
Well, just to give you a little history, when we began training for this flight, the plan was to go to 400 feet, and then the plan was to go to 100 feet. It was only recently, say in maybe the past 4 or 5 months, that we decided to go into 10 meters, or about 33 to 38 feet.
Yeah, all right. The world.
I think that no matter what we do, we're still going to get some good information from this flight. This flight's really a test flight for the upcoming docking mission that will take place this summer with Atlantis and Mir. And obviously, the closer we can get, the better it will be for that flight. But even if we only go to 1,000 feet, if we only go to 400 feet, if we only go to 100 feet on this flight, we will still be getting a lot of good information for that flight in testing our navigation sensors, our communication, and our flying quality.
Right. The world watched your launch with more than average interest, I think. Were you thinking about anything personal as Discovery left the ground last week? This is again for Eileen, I'm sorry.
Well, I guess I'm not sure what to say to that. The way I thought about the whole thing is, you know, I've trained for 4.5 years for this flight, and I've just been so focused on doing my job, and I've been thinking about making sure that the mission is successful and doing everything that I can to make sure that the launch was successful, the on-orbit obstacle was successful, and the entry and landing. And this mission won't be over even after we land, because we've got a lot of work to do afterwards. And we're so busy here on orbit, it just seems like a lot of work. We kind of wish we had more time off and more time to think about those sorts of things.
Yeah, I get the impression that you really don't like all the hoopla about being the first woman pilot. Do you wish people would stop asking you questions about that and just leave you alone to do your job?
Actually, no, it really doesn't bother me that much because I know that there's a lot of people that are interested, especially young women who want to be astronauts someday. And if there's anything that I can do to help young people with their careers, or if there's anything that I can do to help people learn more about the space program, then I'm happy to do my part. And it really doesn't bother me. I just hope that maybe the attention this flight is getting will help more people learn about what the space program is doing for them, and that we really have a super program here that does a lot, not just for the American people, but for everyone around the Earth.
How much different is flying the space shuttle from flying a single-engine private plane like the first plane you trained in?
Well, the launch was different from anything I've ever flown in my life. It was, the launch was pretty violent, I would say. A lot of acceleration, a lot of force. You feel on your body in this direction. Hard to breathe at times when you have a high G-load. In first stage, when the solid rocket motors are burning, you feel a lot of shaking, and it's difficult to write anything or to read the displays. And I've never flown an airplane like that, so this is really a leap for me into some new type of flying.
No kidding. Why don't you pass the microphone over to Janice Voss. Janice, we've had just a lot of questions for you. A couple months ago, you did an interview pre-flight, and you talked about a lot of the science experiments back in the space lab, and you mentioned, maybe inadvertently, that there were some rats aboard. Several people have faxed in questions. How are the rats? Did they, in fact, make it? Are they okay? Are they being used in an experiment?
The rats are doing fine. They are being used in an experiment. We took a look at them yesterday. We checked them every day, and they were looking very happy. Their usual pink noses and white fur, and just having a great time in space like we are.
Yeah. What's been the biggest surprise on this mission for you?
The biggest surprise is that it's so much like my first flight. I had thought that maybe some of the excitement would wear off, or my focus would be so different that I would seem like the last one was a distant memory. But getting back up into orbit, it's like I just left, and I'm on the same mission, and I'm just had taken a brief vacation. It's really fun to be back up here, and I can't wait to fly again, because we're having such a great flight. Everyone gets better.
No kidding. From an 8-year-old in Devon, England, actually a class of 8-year-olds in Devon, a question about pollution. Does all the fuel burned to get you into orbit cause much damage to the environment?
NASA has looked at this very carefully. They did a study several years ago, or they had a study done that looked at a shuttle flight rate that was typical of what we fly, and included the Titan launches, which also have the solid motors. The main engines on our orbiter basically create steam, so they aren't any problem. It's the two solid rocket boosters that are of concern, and they looked at that, and the combination of all the Titan launches and the shuttle launches for a typical year contribute less than 0.2% to the total effect on the ozone layer, which would be the most dominant concern. It generates a very small hole that dissipates very quickly. And so we believe, as astronauts, part of our job is to help with the environment, and the benefits of going to space and being able to study the Earth from space far outweigh the small amount, almost really negligible, impact to the local environment.
Yeah. From a viewer in Spain, tell us what it felt like when your body changed from normal gravity to weightlessness. Eileen was talking about this pressure on her chest when she left the Earth. Is the process of adapting to weightlessness quick, or does it take hours or days, or what?
It's a little bit different for every person. I'm one of the quicker ones on the average, because the only real symptom I have is the full head. When we're in space, there's a gravity pulling fluid down into our feet, so it distributes more evenly in your body. And I had exactly the same sensation I had on my first flight, which is, as you know, when we launch, the orbiter's on its tail, so we're lying on our back with our feet up, like if you took a chair and laid it down on the floor. And I got up to orbit, and the main engine's cut off, and my first thought was,
are we still launching? Because I still felt like I was lying on my back with my feet in the air. That's exactly the same feeling for me the first couple of days in space because of the full head. So from my perspective, anybody at home can try this. If you want to know what it feels like to be in space, for me, for the first 2 days, just go home, lie down on the floor, put your feet up on the couch, and stay there for about 10 minutes. And that's what it feels like to me, which means, of course, we actually, for me, I start the adaptation on the pad.
Yeah. Anybody else have radically different experiences? Vladimir, Eileen?
Yes, I expect this launch something new for me. And yes, it was some different because boosters working a little bit different. It's a little bit bigger vibration, and but if to see for launch, it's approximately 9 minutes on the space shuttle to orbit, and same way Soyuz rocket to orbit, and approximately same G, and it's okay, and I expect approximately same.
Yeah. Every time I ask viewers to write in or call in questions about a space mission, they ask about flying saucers. Now, American astronauts have traditionally said, no, we don't see any. You've been in space longer than anybody. Have you seen anything outside the Mir? I mean, when you were there for a year, that was just inexplicable to you, that you just couldn't figure out? Do you think there are flying saucers? Did you see any evidence of that?
This question I have all of the time after my flight in Space Station Mir, but I can say through 1 year I flew on the station, I didn't see anything strange. For example, something what I cannot explain. Everything was, if we saw something strange, but we can explain it. What is it? And why and when, and right now I flew on the space shuttle, and the same way I didn't see anything strange.
Yeah, all right. A 6-year-old in
somebody.
yeah, a 6-year-old in Greece wants to know what he should do to become a cosmonaut or an astronaut. What advice would you give young people in Russia, the United States, Greece, any place in the world about this? Not able to hear you, Janice. I'm sorry. Try pushing the button a little harder, maybe. There you are.
The advice I like to give is the same that I give to students when I'm talking to them on my public speaking trips. And it's advice that I got from Rusty Schweikart when I was interested in being an astronaut and was in college and went to a talk that he gave. And the beauty of the advice is that it really applies to a lot of careers, not to being an astronaut. And that is, it's going to be very hard to predict exactly what you're going to need when you get to the time in your life when it'll be time to apply for a job. So the best thing you can do is to prepare your basic skills. If you're interested in science and technology, go to a good school, get a good degree in that field, keep your interest a little broad so you have some flexibility, work hard and do your best, and most of all, have a good time at what you're doing, because if you enjoy doing it, it'll make working at it fun, a challenge instead of a chore, and that enthusiasm will show up both in your performance and in your impressions you make on other people when you're applying for a job, and that will make you very competitive in any field that you want to go into.
All right, the three of you have been delightful. You've been very good guests on CNN International today. Thank you very much for doing this. See you when you get home. Have a safe flight. Have a good rendezvous tomorrow. We'll all be watching with bated breath. One of the things, Janice, you said in an earlier interview, you said, we'll know how successful this mission has been based on how much time CNN spends on it. We're spending a great deal of time on it, as you have just experienced. There's some Russian journalists waiting to talk to you as well, so I'll get off and let them get on. Thanks very much for being with us. CNN's World News continues in a moment. Stay with us.
This has been a special report from CNN International.
A crew of 5 astronauts and 1 cosmonaut is busy conducting science experiments and testing a new radio aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery. The radio will be used to communicate with cosmonauts on board the Russian space station Mir. Discovery is scheduled to rendezvous with Mir on Monday. But there is a big question as to how close the 2 spacecraft will get. If all goes well, the shuttle could come as close to Mir as 10 meters. But Russian space officials may not allow the shuttle within 100 meters. The problem is that Discovery has been leaking fuel from 2 of its steering jets. CNN Discovery is currently chasing Mir through space. The shuttle is closing on the space station at a rate of about 350 kilometers every 90 minutes. In the eastern... Astronauts aboard the U.S. Space Shuttle Discovery are heading for a close encounter with Russia's Mir space station. Just how close they come may depend on whether or not a fuel leak has been repaired. CNN's John Holliman has been monitoring the repair effort in space from here on the ground, and he joins us now with an update.
Actually, this is going to be this has been so far a very interesting space mission, and it's getting more so. The space shuttle continues to fly closer and closer to the Russian Mir space station. The crew tells CNN some work in the past few hours has solved one problem. There are a couple of leaky jets on this thing. One yesterday afternoon is right here, and it was leaking much worse than another one back here was since the beginning of the mission. But both of these leaks are getting better, we're told. A few minutes ago, the crew opened and closed the manifold supplying fuel to this still leaking rear thruster to see if that would clear whatever's making it leak propellant. At the end of the firing, Commander Jim Weatherby said he's not optimistic that what he did stopped the leak. But you can see the firing there on your screen. Pilot Eileen Collins says the big leak, which started yesterday, has been fixed.
Well, we've got some good news for you. The leaky jet in the forward part of the orbiter was, the first time we tried to fire it, it started leaking. But the problem or the leak since has sealed itself, and everything is normal on the front. The leak we had in the back began right after main engine cutoff, and the leak rate is gradually slowing down, and we hope by tomorrow the leak will be totally gone.
Astronaut Janice Voss talked to us about adapting to weightlessness. This is her second flight, and she explains what it feels like to change from weighing something to weighing almost nothing.
I had exactly the same sensation I had on my first flight, which is, as you know, when we launch, the orbiter's on its tail, so we're lying on our back with our feet up, like if you took a chair and laid it down on the floor. And I got up to orbit, and the main engine's cut off, and my first thought was, are we still launching? Because I still felt like I was lying on my back with my feet in the air. That's exactly the same feeling for me the first couple of days in space because of the full head. So, from my perspective, anybody at home can try this. If you want to know what it feels like to be in space, for me, for the first 2 days, just go home, lie down on the floor, put your feet up on the couch, and stay there for about 10 minutes. And that's what it feels like to me, which means, of course, for me, I start the adaptation on the pad.
There have always been questions for the astronauts about unidentified flying objects. Today, we asked our CNN International viewers to come up with questions. One of them sent us this fax in the mail. I don't know how clearly you can see it. It's a 4-headed monster, and the question at the top of the page is there anybody out there? Asking about UFOs. Well, I asked that question to cosmonaut Vladimir Titov, who's been in space for more than a year on the Russian space station. I asked if he's seen any evidence of UFOs.
So 1 year I flew on the station, I didn't see anything strange. For example, something what I cannot explain. Everything was, if we saw something strange, but we can explain it. What is it, and why, and when, and right now I flew on the space shuttle, and the same way I didn't see anything strange.
Right now, the crew is getting ready for tomorrow's big event, the Rendezvous with the Mir. CNN International will have live and videotape pictures from both the space shuttle and the Russian Mir throughout the afternoon and evening, European time. NASA and the Russian Space Agency promises great pictures, so join us if you'd like to watch this whole thing.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
Nobody's out there, huh?
Well, that's what the cosmonauts and the astronauts say. We'll see.
Für Wladimir Titov, den russischen Kosmonauten, wird es nicht das erste Mal sein, dass er die Mir sieht. 1987 und 88 hat er 366 Tage in der Raumstation verbracht. Jetzt ist das geplante Wiedersehen jedoch gefährdet.
Rendezvous im All gefährdet. Ein neues Leck an der amerikanischen Raumfähre Discovery gefährdet das Treffen mit der russischen Raumstation Mir. Von 2 Treibstofflecks in den Steuerdüsen konnte eines bereits am Samstag von den Astronauten geschlossen werden. Die Russen befürchten, dass der aus den Lecks austretende Treibstoff die Station beschädigen könnte. Die Discovery wird sich bei einer Geschwindigkeit von 28.000 Stundenkilometern 400 Kilometer von der Erde entfernt an Mir annähern. Aufgrund der Probleme erwägt die NASA, die Begegnung von 10 Metern auf 122 Meter auszuweiten. Das Rendezvous mit Mir soll eine Generalprobe für die von Juni dieses Jahres angeplanten 7 Flüge der Fähre Atlantis sein. Diese wurde extra für das Andocken an der russischen Raumstation umgebaut. Es wäre das erste amerikanisch-russische Treffen im Weltraum seit der Apollo-Sojus-Koppelung 1975. Unter der 5-köpfigen Besatzung ist mit Eileen Collins zum ersten Mal eine Frau als Pilotin dabei.
Die 5 amerikanischen Astronauten und ihr russischer Kollege werden die Discovery am Montag bis auf wenige Meter an Mir heransteuern. Im Sommer soll dann eine weitere US-Raumfähre an der russischen Station andocken.
The shuttle astronauts still don't know how close they'll get to the station. The problem is a leaking steering jet. Russian space officials are worried that leaking fuel could damage the space station. If the leak is too big, the Russians will not allow the shuttle any closer than 120 meters. But if the situation improves, Discovery could be allowed to approach.
Vom Start weg hatte die Discovery Probleme mit ihren Steuerdüsen. Schon zum 2. Mal wurde ein Ventil durch ausgelaufenen und gefrorenen Treibstoff blockiert. Der Crew gelang es jedoch, den Schaden zu beheben. Das historische amerikanisch-russische Rendezvous mit der Raumstation Mir bleibt trotzdem gefährdet. Ein zweites Leck am Heck konnte noch nicht geschlossen werden. Die Discovery soll sich am Montag bis auf wenige Meter der 100 Tonnen schweren Mir nähern. Ein schwieriges Manöver, doch die Besatzung mit Pilotin Eileen Collins scheint zuversichtlich, wie die Fernsehbilder aus dem All beweisen.
Die Düse der amerikanischen Raumfähre Discovery gefährdet weiter die Annäherung an die russische Station Mir. Die Pilotin des Shuttles, Eileen Collins, sagte heute in einem Fernsehinterview, sie hoffe, dass die undichte Stelle bis zum für morgen Abend geplanten Manöver geschlossen werden könne. Experten befürchten, dass auslaufender Treibstoff das empfindliche Sonnensegel von Mir beschädigen könnte. Die Annäherung an Mir soll Höhepunkt der 8-tägigen Discovery-Mission sein.
Die US-Raumfähre Discovery kann der russischen Raumstation Mir heute Abend nicht so nahe kommen wie ursprünglich geplant. Eigentlich sollte der Abstand 10 Meter betragen. Doch eine defekte Steuerdüse macht der Discovery-Besatzung wohl einen Strich durch die Rechnung. Das Annäherungsmanöver ist die Generalprobe für das im Juni geplante Andocken eines amerikanischen Shuttles an die russische Station.
The white specks that you see moving across your screen from right to left are fuel leaking from a thruster on board the U.S. Space Shuttle. It's continued to leak all day long. The Russians have agreed in the past 20-30 minutes to allow the 2 ships to get as close as 38 feet or 10 meters apart, coming up this afternoon or this evening at 19:20 GMT. NASA promises spectacular pictures from the perspective of the astronauts on board the shuttle and from the perspective of the cosmonauts on board the Mir. CNN is working with Russian television, with NASA television, and with all sorts of picture sources in order to get the most spectacular moving pictures of this docking maneuver that have probably ever been seen by anybody anywhere. And they'll be coming up. We'll be having reports throughout the day here on CNN International. We'll have some coverage beginning at 1800 GMT, which will get more extensive as the evening goes along, GMT-wise. So we urge you to stay with us. The good news, the big news in the past few minutes, Reed, is that the Russian Space Agency has agreed with the American Space Agency to allow this 747 size Mir and the DC-9 size space shuttle to get within 38 feet of each other. If you consider the physics of this, it's quite something. They're both 250 miles away from the Earth, up in space. They are traveling at 17,000 miles an hour, and they're going to be 38 feet apart if all goes well in the next few hours. Reed?
All right, thank you, John Holloman, and we'll look for that.
The U.S. Space Shuttle Discovery and its crew are only hours away from an encounter with Russia's Mir space station, and the rules for that rendezvous have changed yet again. Discovery has been given clearance to fly within about 12 meters of the Russian space station Mir. Discovery's crew members are busily preparing for the encounter scheduled about an hour from now. A fuel leak from Discovery that raised concern has now been stopped. There were fears that frozen fuel chunks could hit and damage the space station's capsule in which the Russian cosmonauts are to return to Earth next month. CNN International plans to bring you the historic rendezvous between Discovery and Mir when it happens.
Heute soll es im All ein Rendezvous der Raumfähre mit der russischen Station Mir geben. Trotz Problemen mit einer Steuerdüse darf die Discovery nun doch bis auf 10 Meter an die Raumstation heran. Das teilte das Kontrollzentrum der US-Raumfahrtbehörde NASA wenige Stunden vor dem Zusammentreffen mit. Seit Tagen hatten die Astronauten der Discovery versucht, ein Leck an der Steuerdüse zu reparieren.
Das Leck wurde unmittelbar nach dem Start der Discovery am Freitag entdeckt. Als Ursache wird gefrorener Treibstoff vermutet, der das Schließen des Ventils verhindert hatte. Russische Experten befürchteten, dass auslaufender Treibstoff das empfindliche Sonnensegel der Mir beschädigen könnte. Deshalb sollte die Discovery einen Abstand von 122 Metern zur Raumstation halten. Zunächst hatte die sechsköpfige Crew noch gehofft, dass die Sonne den Treibstoff auftauen würde. Und nachdem sich ein zweites Leck an einer Antriebsdüse wieder geschlossen hatte, war Shuttle-Pilotin Eileen Kelly zuversichtlich. In einem am Sonntag aus dem All übertragenen Interview sagte sie, sie hoffe, der Schaden könne noch rechtzeitig vor Beginn des Manövers behoben werden. Die Begegnung der Raumfähre mit der Raumstation soll der Höhepunkt der 8-tägigen Discovery-Mission sein. Es wäre das erste amerikanisch-russische Treffen im Weltraum seit der Apollo-Sojus-Koppelung im Juli 1975. Am Samstag hatte die Crew mit ihren wissenschaftlichen Experimenten begonnen. Heute soll sich die Discovery der Mir bis auf wenige Meter im Andockbereich nähern, um sie zu fotografieren und Kontakt aufzunehmen. Mit dem Treffen im Weltraum soll ein neues Kapitel amerikanisch-russischer Zusammenarbeit in der Raumfahrt eröffnet werden. Im Juni wird die Raumfähre Atlantis intensiven Kontakt zu Mir aufnehmen.
From CNN International, this is World News.
Good afternoon from the CNN Center in Atlanta. I'm Jonathan Mann.
And good evening from London. I'm Ralph Begleiter. Hillary Bowker is off today. Coming up in this hour of World News, the Space Shuttle Discovery has Russia's space station in its sights, and Discovery won't stop until it's only about 10 meters away.
Shuttle Discovery has begun its final approach to the Russian space station Mir. Within the hour, the two spacecraft are to be closer than they've ever been. CNN's John Holloman has been following the progress of the Discovery and the Mir, and he joins us now to let us know what's going on up there.
John, from what we can hear on NASA Select television and from Russian television, there's a lot of jabbering back and forth. The astronauts and cosmonauts are able to talk to each other just sort of out the window of their two spaceships now. I've got a piece of NASA animation that illustrates from sort of the Earth's eye view what's going on in space. Let me play that for you now. What will happen in about the next 15 minutes is the shuttle will be where it is now in this view at the bottom of your screen, the Mir above it in space. The Earth is below all this, and the shuttle will do what it's doing right now, approach the Mir, so that about 1920 GMT, the shuttle will be in this position that you see, and then it will slowly, slowly, slowly approach the Mir until it is about 10 meters away, as Ralph Begleiter reported. What will happen at that point is the shuttle will park right there at that spot for 40 minutes. The astronauts and the cosmonauts will be able to wave at each other out the windows of their various spaceships, something that hasn't happened, contact between a U.S. ship and a Russian ship since the 1975 Apollo-Soyuz mission. The two ships will, as I say, stay at about this position, 10 meters apart. And if they can do this, if the commander of the shuttle, Jim Weatherby, can control the steering rockets and make all this happen, then it'll be very good news for the Russians, for the Americans, for the Europeans, for the others who are participating in the International Space Station construction project. Because if you can't do this, you can't build a space station. And if this is successful today, about 2 months from now, actually in June, early June, the Mir and another shuttle will get even closer than this. They will connect, and some cosmonauts who've been on the Mir for months and months will crawl into the space shuttle and come back to Earth, and some people on the shuttle will crawl into the Mir, and so there'll be a crew swap between the American ship and the Russian ship. So it's a dramatic test of technology and the ability of the Americans and the Russians to cooperate together, and we'll be having live coverage of it for the next couple of hours here on CNN International.
Okay, it's a complicated bit of business. John Holloman, thanks so much for being with us.
I'll be back.
Ralph? Delicate ballet going on in space right now. The U.S. Space Shuttle Discovery slowly closing in on Russia's space station Mir. CNN's John Holloman joins us once again to explain exactly what they're doing up there.
Yeah, let's go back to the live picture. A lot more interesting than this face, I will tell you. There are cameras in the Space Shuttle Discovery, and that camera in the Space Shuttle Discovery cargo bay, I was about to say is taking this picture, but it isn't. You can see the space shuttle kind of at the top of your screen with its nose pointing up toward the top. This is a picture from the Russian space station Mir. The first time I have ever seen live television pictures from the Mir, and it's pictures of the Mir from one end of the Russian space station down showing the U.S. shuttle. A couple of minutes ago, there was a picture that was provided to us that showed the open cargo bay doors of the shuttle as the shuttle was further away from the Russian ship than this right now. What you can see here is the Earth in the background of your screen. The two space vehicles are 250 miles above the Earth. They are both traveling at 17,500 miles an hour. And the fact that the movement you're seeing is very slow is because the commander of the shuttle is operating his controls with such precision.
Can we get any sense, do you have any sense of the distance between those two craft right now?
Yeah, they're supposed to be 400 feet apart at this point. This is the distant rendezvous. This is the fallback position that NASA and the Russians have been telling us about. This is the worst that could happen, John. In a few minutes this afternoon, about 40 minutes from now, the ships are going to be 10 meters apart. They'll be so much closer that you probably won't be able to get anything like this sort of perspective, but you'll be able to look in the window of the Russian space station and see people's faces, and you'll be able to look in the windows on the top, the ceiling windows in the space shuttle, and see the astronauts.
Now, our shot keeps changing all this time. I would suppose that we're getting this from Russian television, and we're grateful for it. It's an extraordinary glimpse of what's going on in space right now. What's intriguing for anyone who's ever driven and parked a car is this is quite a parking job, because this vehicle was moving thousands of kilometers an hour just a little while ago.
That's right, and they both still are. I mean, the two things are moving at a high rate of speed, but they are... Just a sec. What we're going to do is maybe switch cameras. I'm hearing the capsule communicator on board Discovery, Story Musgrave, talking to his astronauts. Let's have a listen.
Provided to us from the payload bay cameras on board Discovery. This is the space station Mir from a distance of roughly 400 or so feet. The picture on the right is provided to us from the cameras on Mir of the Space Shuttle Discovery as it moves into position along the velocity vector or directly in front of the space station.
I don't think we can make that point too plainly. What we're seeing on the left, then, is not a still photograph. That is a live picture. Is that it?
Discovery, they have a picture of Mir from camera Bravo.
What this tells you is that the camera in the payload bay of Discovery is being operated by a machine that is able to hold it very steady. And the camera that's pointed out the porthole of the space station Mir, the camera that's providing this picture, is being held by one of the cosmonauts.
Now, this is extraordinary to watch, but let me ask you, is there any scientific, technical, or other reason to do this kind of photography right now?
Well, yes, there is, John, especially in the pictures being taken of the Mir. There have not been pictures this good taken of the outside of the Russian space station in a long, long time. And these pictures are going to be valuable to the Russians and to the Americans. You just saw that leaky thruster on the back of the U.S. space shuttle. Didn't seem to be leaking, but they say it still is, or at least as of an hour or two ago, still had a certain amount of fuel coming out. But so this is the picture. This is the money shot, if you will, of this mission so far. It's a picture that's being broadcast live in Russia and as well as all over the world by us on CNN International, and I'm sure that scientists and space experts all over are looking at these pictures with great interest right now.
Now, you wouldn't know it to look at it, but in fact, the Mir is, well, it's kind of old. I gather it's older than the space scientists in Russia ever intended for it to be.
Yeah, it's been there about a decade, and it still works. And you know, there have been financial problems in the Russian economy as well as the American economy. And if you got something 10 years old that works and you don't have enough money to replace it, and you can keep it up, that's what they're doing.
So essentially, what we're doing now is we're walking around the used car kicking the tires in the
Yeah,
speed.
exactly. And the cosmonauts aboard the Mir doing the same thing.
It must be frustrating, and this is once again something, if you're just joining us, there will be no exchange of personnel. No one's going to come out and shake hands in these shots, right?
Yeah. The reason for that is that there is a government contract to build something called a docking adapter. It's a piece of metal and plastic that will connect, not this shuttle, but another one, the Atlantis, to the Mir, and it's not ready yet. It'll be ready for a June shuttle mission that will take it up there and connect a docking adapter to the Mir, and then there'll be a tunnel open between the two vehicles, and astronauts and cosmonauts will just, go back and forth and check out each other's digs. But this is quite, this is pretty impressive to be able to see these pictures, both from Discovery and from Mir.
Activities here are
Let's listen to a minute to NASA's commentator in Russia.
that are being shown both from Discovery of the Mir space station, as well as the views from the space station of Discovery. As we've heard, the view of Discovery from the space station Mir is coming from one of the modules. This is a view from the core module, which is the Mir module launched in February of 1986. This is a view from a porthole, through a porthole on that module. There's also an additional camera that will be used for views of Discovery during the fly-around phase from the Crystal module. This primary module of Mir showing the nose of Discovery.
This is NASA commentator Kyle Herring, who is in Moscow rather than his usual position in Houston.
73 days ago.
Or rather, not Moscow, but in the Russian Space Center.
The viewing room here in the Mission Control Center has about 150 to 200 people watching over the balcony, the big, large screens in front of the flight control room.
You could hear the Russian cosmonauts talking to their mission control room as Kyle Herring, NASA's man at Kaliningrad, is there.
And these two vessels will be getting much closer, in fact. The dangerous business of bringing them closer together is going to get even more dangerous.
Yeah, correct. I've never seen a shot like this. There was a time last summer, John, when you and I were doing a mission where there was a satellite in the payload bay that had a camera on it that they let go out of the payload bay a few feet away to take a picture of the shuttle. But this is sort of the God's eyes view, really, that we're seeing here. You can see the Earth 250 miles below the space shuttle.
Again, this is a view from the core module of the Mir space station. The space station has several modules that have been launched at various times since the first module was launched that make up the complete
Things look so still. They look like they're at rest, but these are, in fact, these spacecraft are whizzing around the Earth at thousands of kilometers an hour. It's an incredibly smooth, graceful picture for something that is hurtling through space with such speed.
Next time they move the camera out so you can see the Earth, you'll be able to see it spinning. They do cover the entire planet every 92 or 3 minutes, John. So that's how fast they're going. And you'll probably be able to see the astronauts. Commander Jim Weatherby is in that left window. You can see the corner of his sleeve there, the little white spot down in the corner of that window at the lower part of your screen, now coming up into view. Weatherby is in charge of, there's a spare set of controls for the shuttle. There you can see Weatherby's hand. He's waving out right now at us and to the Russians.
An appropriate point then to take that wave as a wave goodbye for now. We're going to break away from these pictures, extraordinary pictures of a close encounter, you might say, between Mir and Discovery. We will be coming back to it. We will be coming back to you, John Holloman. Thanks again for being with us.
I'll be here.
We'll be back with more news right after this. U.S. Space Shuttle Discovery is approaching its close encounter with the Russian space station Mir. Two space vehicles are within about 100 meters of each other. You're looking now at a live picture from space, within 100 meters and closing. They should reach their closest point within the hour. At that point, they should only be about 10 meters apart. This maneuver is a practice session for an actual docking attempt planned for later this year. We're watching now as these pictures come beamed to us in real time from space. The three crew members aboard the Mir counterparts aboard the U.S. Space Shuttle Discovery. The two spacecraft coming closer to each other than Russian and American craft have for for some 20 years now. Two 100-ton beasts floating in space and smiling at each other, if you will. There were extraordinary pictures that we saw earlier, and we'll be seeing some more of them. I think we're looking now at the cargo bay of the Shuttle Discovery, as seen from the Mir. These two craft will be getting closer and closer. I imagine the pictures will become ever more intriguing as the two craft work towards their ultimate goal of this mission, which is to get each other within about 10 meters. That's an extraordinarily small distance for craft that are still traveling at, I would guess, about 20,000 or thereabouts kilometers per hour as they rotate around the Earth. We're looking now at the Mir itself from, I would gather, the Discovery. These pictures coming to us once again over the great distances of space. That may account for some of the little technical glitches you're seeing, but still extraordinary live images from space itself. These two craft work closer together. We're expecting that they are going to reach their closest point within just the next few hours. When that happens, I expect that we will be coming back to have another closer look.
The orbiter systems are working just fine, and we've gotten a lot of good visuals already of the shuttle and the Russian space station as the two make this close approach.
In Kürze soll die Discovery auf eine Distanz von 10 Metern an die russische Raumfahrtstation Mir heranfliegen.
Annäherung im Weltall war wegen technischer Probleme lange zweifelhaft. Das Rendezvous zwischen der US-Fähre Discovery und der ex-sowjetischen Raumstation Mir wurde zunächst abgesagt und dann in letzter Minute wieder angesetzt. Bis auf 10 Meter, so die Planungen, soll sich Discovery an Mir heranmanövrieren. Erste Übung für künftige Andockunternehmungen mit der Raumfähre Atlantis. Weil die Steuerdüsen der Discovery lecken, hatten die Russen allerdings Angst um ihren Oldtimer. Die Sonnensegel könnten verschmutzen, die Navigationsoptik Schaden nehmen. Jetzt sind die Befürchtungen ausgeräumt. In wenigen Minuten sind sich die beiden Systeme ganz nah.
Nach amerikanisch-russischen Gesprächen ordnete die NASA an, die Treibstoffzufuhr zu dem Triebwerk zu schließen. Das Annäherungsmanöver soll eine erste für Juni geplante Ankoppelung von Discovery an Mir vorbereiten.
This is a special report from CNN International.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Mann. Right now, in one corner of the enormous expanse of space, it is getting a little crowded. Two spacecraft that have traveled tens of thousands of kilometers are moving slowly towards each other in a place of absolute silence, just about close enough to shout. The spacecraft Mir and Discovery going through the motions, preparing for a docking a few months from now and giving us, for a time being, a wonderful glimpse of a little bit of space traffic. Joining us now to talk about what we're watching is CNN science correspondent Miles O'Brien and our self-described rocket nerd, John Holloman himself. John, what are we seeing?
Well, we're seeing a picture out of a porthole in the Mir space station, and the cosmonaut who's operating that camera seems to be wiping the porthole off. It appears there's a little fog on that, probably because he's been breathing so hard at the site that he's able to see out that window. The site that he's able to see is the payload bay of the Space Shuttle Discovery, which is not very far away right now. The shuttle is almost as close as it's going to get to the Mir. There's a little better angle on that. You see the cameras move back into the Mir, and now you can see the front of the shuttle on the left of your screen and the payload bay with the Space Hab module in the center. And as the two ships get closer, I guess that camera is going to zoom in more and more and more on sort of the central area of the shuttle cargo bay. There's another picture. This one is a picture taken from a camera in the payload bay of the space shuttle looking up at the Mir space station. That's the central core unit that you see sort of in the lower center of your screen. That's the basic building block of the Russian space station. And on either side, you could probably see the solar panels which supply power to that segment of the Russian spaceship. The damage to those solar panels from some of the shuttle's thrusters was a big concern to the Russians, but despite that concern, when NASA agreed to shut down the leaking thrusters, the Russians said, okay, Americans, you can come on up close to our spaceship. Miles O'Brien, our science correspondent, has in fact done the same training, or some of the same training, that the shuttle commander has done in docking a space shuttle simulator at the Johnson Space Center in Houston with a Russian space station simulator. Miles, our viewers around the world, I'm sure, just want to know what you have to do, what it feels like, and what you have to do inside the shuttle to steer the shuttle up this close to the Mir.
Well, you basically have a stick, which is just like a stick you would see in a fighter aircraft, and
and you point the stick in the direction you want to go. It's as simple as that. The shuttle takes care of the rest, figuring out which jets to fire to put the shuttle in that position. The shuttle is a pretty nimble aircraft, or spacecraft, I should say. But in this case, the best steering jets which Commander Weatherby could use are not in use because those steering jets would fire directly on the solar panels of the space station Mir. So they're using some braking jets which fire out of the shuttle at an angle. It makes the shuttle a little less nimble than it might otherwise be, thus making it more of a challenge for Weatherby. That picture in the upper left-hand corner of your screen is an important picture. As the Space Shuttle commander and the pilot, whoever's at the control of the Space Shuttle, gets closer to the Mir, he will be watching it on television just like we are. That television camera provides him an exact crosshair reference on his angle into the Space Shuttle Mir. He's got about an 8-degree corridor he's got to fly down. It's pretty precise orbiting and flying.
Now, these are big, big spacecraft. They may look like toys to us watching on TV, but each one of these things, I guess, is in the neighborhood of 100 tons, so you don't want to park this thing badly, do you?
No, you don't.
No, you don't.
Let's listen to the NASA commentary for a minute and get their update on the situation.
The small porthole that is at the top of the view from Discovery. It's that small circular dark spot. She has asked the crew members from Discovery several times whether or not they can see her wave. Earlier, the Mir cameras were able to pick up a picture of Vladimir Titov from the windows of the orbiter.
There's a close-up view of the nose end of the space shuttle. You just saw 2 thrusters fire on the front of the shuttle. Jonathan, you can see them firing sideways. There's another firing. Now, Miles, you said that operating the stick like you would on an airplane is what makes the fire come out of those holes on the side. And it's all done by computers, huh?
All done by computers. Certain of these steering jets are disabled, of course, because of the concerns that it might contaminate or damage the Mir. So in this process, he is using just a small portion of the toolbox which the shuttle carries into orbit. It's interesting. It's not exactly like flying. You have to anticipate long in advance. Anything you do in this situation requires a lot of forethought, and that is why you actually have an astronaut at the stick. A computer might not necessarily be good in this situation.
And I guess there's a way to override if you had to. And make it do things if the computer decided it wasn't to do the wrong thing to you.
Well, NASA wants to have a human in the loop here, and it's probably a good idea when you have such 2 large craft in close proximity.
Now, once again, we're not expecting those 2 to actually link up. We're not going to see them touch each other. They're simply going to get close and flirt, as it were.
So to speak.
10 meters is the distance.
And the fact that this is working so well probably must make the Russians and the Americans feel pretty good about the June docking that's going to take place between the shuttle Atlantis, a different member of the U.S. shuttle fleet, and the Mir space station.
There have been a lot of tense faces, I would think, both in Moscow and in the United States, or in Russia and the United States, among authorities, who are trying to decide, in fact, whether it would even be safe enough to try this. Over the last hours, people have been working at great distance, both up in space and down on Earth in the United States and in Russia, trying to figure out whether this should be tried. And I imagine at this moment there's probably still a little bit of anxiety, some gratitude that the decision has been made, but there were those who thought, until recently at least, that this would be too dangerous to try with the shuttle having the technical problems that it's been having.
Yeah, we were just looking in the window where Commander Jim Weatherby is standing with that control stick on his hand that Miles is talking about.
Space Hat module.
I would say
a camera that is very near the position where the docking camera will be when Atlantis docks with Mir later this year.
I would say both control centers in Houston and Kaliningrad.
The round structure in the center of this view is the docking port on the Crystal module.
Pretty happy with what they've seen thus far.
That is the docking port which Atlantis will use when the docking actually takes place.
John and Miles, we'll be probably sitting here again watching these a different shuttle and this same space station dock. This is where it would be. This is where the docking would occur. And this picture would just get larger and larger and larger on the screen until the 2 ships connected.
One thing that we're not seeing that we were seeing earlier, it was very intriguing to see you report on it, in fact, John, were what looked like little marbles floating across our television screens, and those were little
particles of propellant from that leaking jet. But see, the jet's been shut off at the source now, Jonathan. It's it can't steer the shuttle right now because it's been shut off, but by the same token, it can't contaminate the Mir.
So we're not seeing those marbles, and if we do, I guess let's all raise an eyebrow together.
Yeah.
What's interesting here is you look at this, it almost looks like a still photograph. The closure rate is incredibly slow. It is 3 centimeters per second. That's a very slow approach rate. The Russians have a long memory of the Apollo-Soyuz docking in 1975. At that time, when the Apollo craft docked with the Soyuz craft, it screamed on in there like a sports car might, and it was a hard dock, which the Russians have long remembered, and they're very sensitive about the issue of coming in at a good controlled speed. I'd say so far the shuttle is doing just that.
Right. Now, we may be able to see Bernard Harris, the payload commander, down in the thing with the American flag and the Russian flag. There's a window there, and he is looking out right now, taking pictures as the two spacecraft approach each other.
Мы пожмем друг другу руки и вместе войдем в следующее тысячелетие. Спасибо огромное. Самые прекрасные пожелания нашим будущим встречам, нашей дружбе, нашей совместной деятельности на благо людей. У нас на борту в порядке все. Мы очень рады, что вы с нами рядом. Мы вас любим. Мы единое племя, племя небожителей. Наверное, это самое фантастическое.
The picture on the upper left of your screen is a picture from the Space Shuttle Discovery showing the Mir space station. The picture on the lower right from Russian television, I believe, is a picture of Discovery from the Mir. And what you're hearing in the background in Russia is the statement, I believe, read by the crew members of the Mir announcing that this mission to this point has been a success. It wouldn't surprise me at all to hear Commander Jim Weatherby and perhaps some other members of his crew responding to that statement in English in a minute or two. This is about the point in time when the two spacecraft are supposed to be as close together as they're going to get, about this 10-meter range.
Now, this will occur for about 10 minutes. They'll station keep, as they call it, which essentially means flying in close formation at this point. And if the shuttle and the Mir spacecraft are in any way not lined up exactly as they should be, Commander Weatherby will attempt a maneuver to change the angle of the shuttle so it would be perfectly aligned as if it were going to be ready for a docking. This will test the handling capability close in.
Did you see that picture? There was a picture from the Mir space station taken through a window of the space shuttle onto the flight deck of the space shuttle, showing pilot Eileen Collins floating around in weightlessness on the space shuttle itself. What a remarkable time this is for United States-Russian space cooperation and the space programs of all the nations of the world. They're virtually all going to be cooperating over the next 8 or 10 years.
This is also, just to throw in a completely non-technological thought here, this is a wonder of the 20th century, almost the 21st century, home movies from space. Yeah. These are astronauts and cosmonauts taking pictures for us and for their children and for their world that might have been put on celluloid in another era and shared on a basement screen someday. These are home movies from a place no one has ever called home, and we're watching them live. It's an extraordinary thing.
And I should tell you one more thing, speaking of movies. In the cargo bay of the space shuttle, there is probably the best movie camera on Earth, the IMAX camera, the wide format, huge frame movie camera that is being cranked up about now and will go till it runs out of film. It's going to take pictures of the space station like have never been taken before. And for people who aren't getting to see these live pictures here on CNN International, they'll be able to go to IMAX theaters all over the world and see another round of photographs. And one more programming note, I guess I could call it. In a few minutes, after this station keeping is concluded and the two ships drift apart, the space shuttle will fly a circle around the Mir at several hundred feet away, and they'll be able to see the Russian space station from angles that have never been seen before by people who are other than Russian cosmonauts coming up to get on board.
There's actually a pretty good technical reason why they're doing that. First of all, they want to make sure that they haven't damaged the solar panels in this close flyby. The second reason is the shuttle commanders and pilots want to know exactly what that space station looks like. So when they're doing their training and practicing their docking maneuvers, they're using the best information possible. That space station Mir, some parts of it have been up in orbit since 1986. It might have degraded a little bit over the course of the years, and they want to have an accurate picture of what it looks like for their training.
And we should point out that the commander of the shuttle that's going to do the docking in June is Hoot Gibson, one of the chief astronauts. And by the way, another thing for our CNN International viewers, coming up in about 3 hours from right now, we're going to be talking to the flight engineer of the June mission, who's going to join us and assess how successful or unsuccessful today's work was. It's vitally important to him because he's going to be on the Atlantis coming up in June. And we've just been told that the two spacecraft are now 40 feet apart. Those are the rooftop windows on the space shuttle where Commander Weatherby and pilot Eileen Collins are standing looking up at the Russian spacecraft. 40 feet away, and they're closing at 3 centimeters a second, huh, Miles?
3 centimeters a second. Rather slow, and it's sort of like watching paint dry. It's kind of slow, but when you've got 200-ton crafts circling, orbiting the globe at 17,500 miles an hour, best to come in slowly.
I think it's like paint on a Picasso myself, I'll tell you. It's beautiful stuff. That's a picture of Discovery. You see the sun's coming up.
Now, the timing of this close-in flyby was very critical. The Russians wanted to make sure that they had good radio telemetry contact with their space station during this close-in flyby. So the timing was very precise so that they would be over a tracking station in Russia, which would have that information so that the controllers in Kaliningrad could have contact with Mir. So
another thing that's interesting about this. We'll listen for a minute, get an update here.
Can you confirm that you do the mid-deck ATU config is correct? We're in PDT at this time.
Copy, Mike.
Mike Pohl, the flight engineer, is operating the computers for this, and all the switches have to be in the right position. And he was talking to the ground, are the switches in the right position on the computer so that we do exactly what we're supposed to do? Look at all the I'd call them protuberances attached to the Russian space station. These things that look like arms and antennas and various sensors that are on the outside. Some of those are very delicate. In fact, most of them are very delicate, and that's one reason for the concern about contamination from the rockets.
It is an extraordinary thing to see. An extraordinary thing indeed. Two spaceships passing in the night. Discovery and Mir making a close approach thousands of kilometers from home. We've been watching it happen live from space, joined here on Earth by CNN science correspondent Miles O'Brien and by our resident rocket man, John Holloman. I'm Jonathan Mann at the CNN Center in Atlanta. Coming up in just a few moments, World News from Washington. Don't go away.
Thank you, Jerome. And this reminder that the incomplete wrap-up of the events of the O.J. Simpson trial to the hour will be seen at 03:30 GMT this and every day. That's World News for Washington for a Monday. I'm Reed Collins, the International Hour after Flip Spiceland now and some weather.
Less than an hour ago, Discovery came to within 40 feet of Mir. It was the first close encounter of U.S. and Russian spaceships in 20 years. Discovery Commander James Weatherby called the rendezvous the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in space.
Die US-Raumfähre Discovery hat sich der russischen Raumstation Mir jetzt doch bis auf wenige Meter genähert. Das Manöver war bis zuletzt gefährdet. Aus einer defekten Düse der Discovery trat Treibstoff aus. Dieses Problem scheint jetzt gelöst.
Discovery hat sich kurz vor 20 Uhr der russischen Weltraumstation Mir genähert. Es ist das erste amerikanisch-russische Treffen im Weltraum seit knapp 20 Jahren. Die russische Weltraumbehörde ließ trotz der undichten Steuerungsdüse der Raumfähre zu, dass die Discovery bis auf 10 Meter an den Andockbereich der Mir-Station herankam. Mit Blinken und über Funk begrüßte die T-förmige russische Station das amerikanische Raumschiff. Danach soll sie um Mir herumgeführt werden. Das von Houston und Kaliningrad aus kontrollierte Rendezvous ist der Höhepunkt der 8-tägigen Discovery-Mission. Es gilt als Generalprobe für die weitere amerikanisch-russische Zusammenarbeit im Weltraum.
Operation Rendezvous im Weltall.
Um 20:20 Uhr unserer Zeit nähert sich die US-Raumfähre Discovery der russischen Weltraumstation Mir bis auf 10 Meter. Aus dieser Perspektive hat man die Discovery noch nie gesehen. Durch das Bullauge der Raumstation Mir kann man dem Space Shuttle direkt in die Ladebucht gucken. Es ist das erste außerirdische Treffen von Russen und Amerikanern seit 20 Jahren. Meine Damen, meine Herren, guten Abend. Die spannende Begegnung im All wollen wir am Ende der Sendung noch genauer verfolgen.
From CNN International, this is World News with Kathleen Kennedy from the CNN Center.
Hello and welcome. Coming up in this edition of World News, they used to race to beat each other in space. Now the U.S. and Russia are practicing for an historic joint effort. Like ships in the night, the U.S. Space Shuttle Discovery and Russia's Mir space station came close enough to wave Monday. It was the first such rendezvous in 20 years. Discovery Commander James Weatherby described it as the most beautiful thing he has ever seen in space. Russian space officials agreed at the last minute to allow Discovery to fly within 10.5 meters of their space station, but only after the shuttle crew shut down a leaking fuel jet, which the Russians feared might damage Mir.
Rond 7:15 onze tijd was de Discovery het ruimtevaartstation op 15 meter genaderd. Vanuit de Mir was te zien hoe de astronauten in de Amerikaanse shuttle foto's maakten. Na een ontmoeting van 10 minuten ging de Discovery weer terug naar een afstand van 120 meter. Daarna cirkelde de shuttle nog geruime tijd om de Mir, terwijl de bemanning nog meer foto's nam. De ontmoeting was een oefening voor de werkelijke koppeling in juni. De vlucht is de eerste van een serie waarin Amerikaanse en Russische ruimtevaartdeskundigen samenwerken.
Gesprochen noch einmal zu den spannenden Dingen, die sich im Augenblick 400 Kilometer über uns im All abspielen. Seit vielen Jahren kreist dort die russische Raumstation Mir und derzeit hält dort seit über 400 Tagen schon der Kosmonaut Waleri Poljakow die Wacht. Hin und wieder kam Besuch vorbei und heute Abend wartete er also auf die amerikanische Raumfähre Discovery. Diese Begegnung soll der Auftakt für eine umfassende Arbeitsteilung im All werden, etwa nach dem Motto: die Russen stellen die Unterkunft, die Amerikaner das Taxi. Bevor ich mich von Ihnen verabschiede und Hildegard Werth den Verlauf des Unternehmens schildert, noch ein kurzer Hinweis auf unsere Spätsendung heute Nacht. Dort wird der deutsche Astronaut Ulf Merbold Gesprächspartner von Nina Ruge sein. Guten Abend.
Zuerst sah man nur leuchtende Pünktchen in der Dämmerung über dem Südatlantik. Die russische Station im Fenster links oben blinkt zur Begrüßung. Sie muss gewissermaßen stillhalten, während der Space Shuttle sich fast unmerklich heranpirscht. Rechts unten das, was die Kosmonauten kurz nach 21 Uhr vom Space Shuttle Discovery erkennen konnten. Ein noch unscharfer Blick in die geöffnete Ladebucht. Nach tagelangem Zögern hatten die Russen in letzter Stunde doch noch ihre Zustimmung zu dem geplanten Rendezvous gegeben, obwohl aus einem Leck in den Antriebsdüsen der Discovery immer noch Treibstoff sprüht. Er droht die empfindlichen Sonnensegel der Raumstation Mir zu beschädigen. Die ist seit fast 9 Jahren in der Erdumlaufbahn und ohnehin etwas altersschwach. Dann um 21:15 Uhr Closest Approach, in der Raumfahrtsprache der Zeitpunkt der größten Annäherung. Etwa 11 Meter dicht hat Kommandant Weatherby die Raumfähre an Mir heranmanövriert. Fast kann man auf der Armbanduhr die Zeit erkennen. So dicht sehen die Russen ihre amerikanischen Kollegen. Der Blick in umgekehrter Richtung ist ein bisschen verwirrend. Ziemlich oben rechts wuselt ein Kosmonaut mit seiner Kamera. Bei 28.000 Stundenkilometern ist das Manövrieren der beiden jeweils etwa 100 Tonnen schweren Kolosse für alle Beteiligten ein riskantes Manöver. Einen Zusammenstoß kann man sich nicht leisten. Im Juni dann soll ein echtes Rendezvous folgen mit Andocken und Umsteigen der Besucher in die Raumstation. So wie vor 20 Jahren, 1975, als sich Apollo 18 und Soyuz 19 zum bisher ersten und einzigen amerikanisch-russischen Weltraumtreffen verkoppelten. Für Elena Kondakova und ihren Kosmonautenkollegen Poljakow ist das Rendezvous sicher eine willkommene Abwechslung. Poljakow wird Mitte März zurückkehren und wird dann mit über 400 Tagen Daueraufenthalt in der Raumstation alle Rekorde gebrochen haben. Elena Kondakova ist seit Oktober oben und soll im Sommer zurückkehren. Das heutige Rendezvous ist nur der Auftakt. 7-mal wollen Russen und Amerikaner ihre Raumfahrzeuge verkoppeln, um etwas noch Größeres vorzubereiten, die gemeinsame Raumstation, ein Projekt fürs nächste Jahrtausend.
This whole mission is a number of firsts. You're the first person to ever command our efforts to rendezvous with a Russian space vehicle, and I know that Eileen Collins is the first woman ever to pilot a space shuttle. So, Eileen, I suppose you have literally shown young women all across the world they can fly as high as their dreams will take them.
Yes, I'd like to say I think this is one of the greatest jobs in the world. And, you know, for any young people out there, if you work hard enough, you can always reach your dreams.
Well, you certainly prove that. Look at that. We enjoy watching the microphone there. I want to ask Dr. Harris to pick it up as it flies toward him. He's going to set another milestone by becoming the first African American to walk in space. So you'll be floating on air, but be sure you come back.
I'm really looking forward to that a couple of days from now. But I know I may be the first, but I won't be the last.
No, you won't be the last. We'll have a lot more if we have you as an example. I'd also like to say something to our Russian partner in space, Vladimir Titov, who's one of the world's most experienced space travelers, and he's the first cosmonaut to see the Mir from an American spacecraft. So I'd like to give you a chance to say anything you'd like to the American people, Mr. Titov.
And good day, Mr. President. Thank you very much. And I'm very happy. I use this possibility to have this great flight. And right now, our press conference, our conversation, listen on the board station Mir, and crew on board station Mir sent for you great hello.
Well, thank you very much. I want to say to all of you again that this is very exciting for us. And, you know, the Vice President's here with me, along with Dan Golden and our science advisor, Dr. Jack Gibbons, and we have supported this space program so strongly. And it's been, as you know, somewhat controversial in the United States in the past, but I think that people all over our country and all over the world will be seeing you today and will say, you know, this is something worth doing. And all of you have made us very proud. I can't thank you enough.
Well, we thank you very much for your support, Mr. President. We know you've done a lot of work over the last several years in getting us this far. There's a lot of people around our country and a lot of people in Russia that we owe a great deal of thanks. And, of course, it starts right at the very top. So thank you very much for your support.
You're welcome. And, of course, we want to say hello to Michael and Janice, too, with whom we haven't talked. We're proud of all of you. Have a wonderful time and come home safe and sound. Give a speech. We're all.
As you saw today, Jim Weatherby does a great job of flying this vehicle, and we're looking forward to seeing his landing.
I'll bet you are.
So it'll be a very good one, I'm quite sure.
That's right. Well, come home to us. We're proud of you. Goodbye.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Quite an ending to quite a day for the Space Shuttle astronauts and the Russian cosmonauts. The astronauts getting to chat with the President of the United States for a few minutes. Mr. Clinton, obviously very proud of what they have done. CNN International News coverage continues in just a moment. Stay with us.
Спасибо, Сереж, спасибо. Всем передавай от нас большое спасибо и до скорой встречи.
Und sie trafen sich doch. Wie geplant um 20:15 Uhr war es perfekt. Das Date von Ost und West im All. 115 Kilometer über Normalnull rückte die US-Raumfähre Discovery sozusagen auf Schnuppernähe an die russische Raumstation Mir heran, auf 12 Meter. Heute Nacht, liebe Zuschauer, willkommen. Eine großartige Leistung des amerikanischen Kommandanten Weatherby und seiner Co-Pilotin. Wie groß, das kann wohl kaum einer besser beurteilen als derjenige, der beide Rendezvous-Partner aus dem FF kennt, weil er sowohl in der Mir als auch in der Discovery war.
Deutschlands Berufsastronaut Ulf Merbold, guten Abend nach Hamburg.
Schönen guten Abend.
Also diese Berichte von dem Schmusekurs der beiden da oben im All, die haben Sie bestimmt nicht kalt gelassen, oder?
Na, ganz bestimmt nicht. Ich bin ja nun zweimal mit dem Shuttle im Weltraum unterwegs gewesen und auf der letzten Mission mit mir geflogen, und zwar mit allen dreien, die jetzt am Fenster hängen und herausschauen, um den Shuttle zu sehen, mit Valeri Poljakov, Viktor Renko und Lena Kandakova.
Wie groß war denn eigentlich das Risiko dieser Annäherung, diese Gefahr durch das Leck im Shuttle?
Also nach meiner Einschätzung minimal. Das ist überhaupt kein Risiko für Mensch und Maschine. Vielleicht ein bisschen das Risiko, dass die Solargeneratoren kontaminiert werden könnten.
Was heißt
aber das ist hypothetisch. Ein bisschen verunreinigt durch möglicherweise austretende Dämpfe, aber minimales Risiko.
Und was ist eine Steuerdüse, aus der dann Benzin oder eben Treibstoff austritt?
Ja, ein Raumschiff, das muss ja in seiner Lage im Weltraum gehalten werden oder auch gedreht werden. Und dazu hat das Shuttle über 100 kleine Raketentriebwerke, mit denen man ihn drehen, wenden und eben steuern kann. Diese arbeiten mit Hydrazin und Stickstofftetroxid. Und wenn da irgendwo ein Leck ist, dann kann entweder ein bisschen Hydrazindampf austreten oder auch ein bisschen Stickstofftetroxid.
Also diese Begegnung der besonderen Art, sie wurde am Abend live aus dem Weltraum übertragen, und die müssen Sie erst mal sehen, bevor Ulf Merbold noch mehr von seinen spacigen Erfahrungen preisgibt.
Zum Wecken eine kleine Aufmerksamkeit der Bodenstation in Houston. Es sollte schließlich ein raumfahrthistorischer Tag werden. Guten Morgen, Discovery. Das war Musik von eurer Wunschliste. Und das ist der Blick, wenn man als Astronaut morgens verschlafen aus dem Fenster guckt. Die Lichter von Chicago. Aber sie sind nicht dort oben, um die Aussicht zu genießen. Schon gar nicht Oberstleutnant Eileen Collins, die sich hier als erste Pilotin einer Raumfähre in die Geschichtsbücher schreibt. Mit an Bord ein russischer Veteran, Wladimir Titov, der bei verschiedenen Missionen schon über ein Jahr in der Schwerelosigkeit des Raums zugebracht hat. Komplikationen hatten gleich nach dem Start am Freitag begonnen. Lecks an 2 Steuerdüsen, die das geplante, fast hautnahe Rendezvous mit der russischen Raumstation Mir lange in Frage stellten. So könnt ihr uns nicht nahe kommen, hatten die Russen signalisiert. Aus Angst, der aus der Discovery austretende Treibstoff könnte die empfindliche Konstruktion der Mir beschädigen. Schwierigkeiten eines Hightech-Stelldicheins in der lichten Höhe von 400 Kilometern über der Erde. Die Discovery-Pilotin machte auf Zweckpessimismus. Auch wenn wir nur 300 Meter an Mir herankommen, gibt uns das wertvolle Informationen für spätere Flüge, auf denen wir dann richtig andocken wollen. Wir testen unsere Navigationssysteme und unsere fliegerischen Fähigkeiten überhaupt. Nach fieberhafter Reparatur der Düsen und kurz vor 20 Uhr deutscher Zeit war es dann soweit. Die Discovery schwebte erstmals ins Blickfeld der Russen, während die amerikanischen Kameras endlich die Mir im Sucher hatten. Dann begann die Präzisionschoreografie, die Houston und Kaliningrad monatelang errechnet hatten. 100 Meter Abstand, 30 Meter, schließlich bei 28.000 Stundenkilometern Geschwindigkeit wohlgemerkt, das minutenlange Verharren in 12 Metern Distanz. Discovery-Kommandant Weatherby hatte sich ein paar Worte zurechtgelegt. Mit uns rücken auch unsere Nationen näher zusammen. Wenn wir das nächste Mal kommen, geben wir einander die Hand und führen unseren Planeten gemeinsam ins nächste Jahrtausend. Das nächste Mal ist schon für den Juni geplant und dann wollen beide Seiten aufs Ganze gehen. Andocken, Crewmitglieder austauschen, im All trainieren für das große gemeinsame Fernziel, die internationale Raumstation. Es geht also weiter mit den Rendezvous irgendwo dort oben, ganz hoch über unseren Köpfen.
Ja, fantastische Bilder. Ulf Merbold, da sausen die also mit 28.000 Stundenkilometern durchs All, die beiden, Mir und Discovery, beide über 100 Tonnen schwer. Was ist denn eigentlich das Kniffligste bei so einem Annäherungsmanöver?
Also ich glaube, das ist für die Amerikaner gar nicht so schwierig, sich eben auf 12 Meter zu nähern. Für das wirkliche Docking, da kommt es dann allerdings darauf an, Zentimeter genau, zwei solche Kolosse in Bezug zueinander zu positionieren. Und das ist natürlich dann schon noch etwas schwieriger, als auf 12 Meter heranzufliegen und diese Position zu halten.
Und was wird dann das Schwierige sein? Also wird das mit Hand gesteuert?
Das wird mit Hand gesteuert. Im Shuttle wird es dazu eine ganz spezielle Kamera geben, die auf der anderen Seite ein bestimmtes Objekt der Mir-Station dann ins Visier nimmt, und mit Hilfe dieser Kamera wird dann der amerikanische Astronaut Gibson, der den Flug im Juni kommandieren wird, dieses Docking vollziehen.
Was wäre denn gewesen, wenn heute dieses Annäherungsmanöver, also diese Generalprobe, nicht geklappt hätte? Wäre dann dieses Manöver im Juni vielleicht gefährdet gewesen?
Nein, ich bin ganz sicher, man hätte es ohne die Generalprobe dann auch machen können. Möglicherweise hätte man dann erst einmal die Annäherung auf 10 Meter gemacht und hätte sich eben ein bisschen mehr Zeit gelassen, als es jetzt nötig sein wird. Nachdem man eben schon so nah herangeflogen ist, wird man im Juni relativ zügig zur Sache kommen können.
Jetzt ist ja die Mir nicht mehr ganz taufrisch und man will bis 1997 diese Undock-Manöver fahren. Warum eigentlich? Kann ja sein, dass die Mir gar nicht mehr so lange lebt.
Nun, zunächst mal ist die Mir gegenwärtig die einzige Raumstation überhaupt und ist natürlich eine attraktive Plattform, wissenschaftliche Experimente durchzuführen. Dann ist ja bis 1997 damit noch viel Gutes zu leisten. Aber dann soll ja eine neue Station im Orbit gebaut werden. Und dafür ist eben das Annähern wichtig. Das ist sozusagen das Klavier jetzt, auf dem man übt, diese Rendezvous, die dann ganz wichtig sein werden, durchzuführen. Ich wollte vielleicht noch dazu sagen, für den Flug im Juni wird ein sehr guter Freund von mir, der vorher mit der Soyuz zur Mir-Station fliegen wird, nämlich Norman Zaggart, mit dem Shuttle wieder zur Erde zurückkehren.
Noch mal ganz kurz zu diesen Steuerdüsen. Die sind ja bei den amerikanischen Shuttles immer mal wieder kaputt. Kann man das nicht abstellen?
Ja, der Shuttle hat, wie ich vorhin schon sagte, über 100 solche kleinen Triebwerke. Die sind mit einem komplizierten Leitungssystem verbunden. Viele Ventile, die eben den Oxidatorfluss und den Treibstofffluss regeln. Das kann schon mal passieren, dass da auch mal eins ein bisschen leckt. An und für sich wird dann ein solches Triebwerk einfach abgestellt, weil man genügend Redundanz hat und auf eins oder zwei auch verzichten kann. In dem speziellen Fall ist es wohl nötig, dass alle funktionieren und dann muss man mit so einem kleinen Leck auch leben. Auf meinem letzten Flug mit dem Shuttle 92 hat es auch ein Leck gegeben.
Also er sieht das ganz cool. Ganz kurz noch, werden Sie denn bei einer dieser 7 weiteren Missionen in Richtung Mir dabei sein?
Ui, das ist eine schwierige Frage. Also ich hatte meiner Frau jetzt zugesagt, es ist das letzte Mal gewesen. Aber es kommen ja immer wieder neue Situationen. Ich will mal mit Beckenbauer sagen, schauen wir mal.
Naja, aber das klingt schon ganz gut. Ich danke Ihnen. Nach Hamburg.
3, 2, 1 and liftoff of Space Shuttle Discovery.
Eileen Collins always wanted to be a pilot. When she was a little girl in Elmira, New York, she found that while women couldn't be combat pilots, it was possible for them to fly a plane.
One day I found an article about women that flew as civilians for the Air Force here in the United States during World War II, and they were ferry pilots. And they were called Women Air Force Service Pilots. And I started learning more about them, and I realized that, yes, women do fly, and someday I could get a pilot's license and learn how to fly and maybe go fly for the military.
But the post-war reality was women just didn't fly for the military.
Worked for a year, saved up my money, took $1,000 to the local airport one summer and said, teach me how to fly. And I think they were a little surprised because there weren't many women that flew, but they were very good, and got my license in about a year it took, just to trying to do it along with school. And there were no women pilots at my local airport, so I sort of, had to look up to the men, and they were super.
When Air Force policy changed to allow women, she jumped at the chance.
I want to be a military pilot. So I think that was my primary goal coming out of college. And in 1978, NASA selected their first 6 women as mission specialists. And that's when being an astronaut became a reality for me. I also graduated from college in 1978. And at that point, I tried to work my career so I would be in jobs that would help train me to be a better astronaut someday.
She flew military planes, including the T-38 she now uses to get from her home base in Houston to the launch pad at the Kennedy Space Center. I asked how flying the shuttle compares to that first private plane.
Well, the launch was different from anything I've ever flown in my life. It was, the launch was pretty violent, I would say. A lot of acceleration, a lot of force you feel on your body in this direction. Hard to breathe at times when you have a high G-load.
After helping steer the shuttle to within 37 feet of the Russian space station, she and her partners got a phone call from the president.
You know, for any young people out there, if you work hard enough, you can always reach your dreams.
There's been a lot of hoopla about the first woman shuttle pilot. I asked if she's tired of all the attention she's getting.
Actually, no, it really doesn't bother me that much because I know that there's a lot of people that are interested, especially young women who want to be astronauts someday. And if there's anything that I can do to help young people with their careers, or if there's anything that I can do to help people learn more about the space program, then I'm happy to do my part.
On launch day, there were scores of female pilots at the Kennedy Space Center to see her lift off.
Well, I think part of the launch that was really exciting for me was to have so many of the women pilots that flew back during World War II come to see the launch, and some of the women who tried to become astronauts back in the early 1960s who are still getting together came out to see the launch, and I thought that was really neat. And I feel like so many of them have become friends of mine now, and I'm sort of carrying on their dreams.
John Holloman, CNN reporting.
Auf 11 Meter näherte sich die US-Raumfähre Discovery der russischen Raumstation Mir. Die anfänglichen Schwierigkeiten waren damit überwunden. Das Heransteuern an die Station war Feinarbeit von Hand. Die Astronauten brauchten dazu über eine Stunde. Aus einer Entfernung von 120 Metern fotografierte Discovery die Raumstation von allen Seiten. Die Fotos werden gebraucht, um die Ankopplung eines Shuttles im Juni vorzubereiten. Für die Discovery-Besatzung ist die Arbeit im All noch nicht beendet. Heute hat sie den Forschungssatelliten Spartan ausgesetzt.
Been a lot of work for Discovery's 4-man, 2-woman crew, including Eileen Collins, who is the first woman to take the helm of a U.S. spacecraft. CNN.
The satellite will fly free for 40 hours and then be retrieved into the shuttle cargo bay Thursday. There, Discovery's crew will use it to practice moving huge, weightless objects. The satellite deployment comes just a day after Discovery's rendezvous with the Russian space station Mir. The event was a space spectacle. 2 100-ton spaceships flying just 11 meters apart at more than 20,000 kilometers per hour.
The shuttle Discovery hovered only 37 feet from the space station Mir. It was the first rendezvous between spacecraft from the U.S. and Russia in 20 years. The shuttle Atlantis is scheduled to dock with the space station in June. And at 7:07, that
sabotage is still suspected, and that China suspects the satellite's U.S. manufacturer, Hughes Space Company. The Apstar 2 was destroyed in an explosion last month, just seconds after the launch of a Chinese rocket. According to the newspaper, evidence suggests it was the satellite that blew up and not the rocket itself. Hughes is not commenting, pending an investigation. The loss of the satellite dealt a heavy blow to China's fledgling commercial rocket industry.
US-Raumfähre Discovery hat ihre Generalprobe glänzend bestanden. Das Rendezvous im All mit der russischen Raumfähre Mir hat geklappt. Jetzt ist der Weg frei für eine neue Phase der amerikanisch-russischen Zusammenarbeit im Weltraum. Ziel ist der Aufbau einer internationalen Weltraumstation bis zum Jahr 2002. Auch Japan, Kanada und die Europäische Raumfahrtbehörde ESA machen bei dem etwa 60 Milliarden Dollar teuren Jahrhundertprojekt mit.
Nächster Schritt in der amerikanisch-russischen Weltraumehe ist im Juni der Start einer solchen Atlantis-Raumfähre. Bis dahin ist sie umgerüstet, um an die russische Raumfähre anzudocken. Bis zum Jahr 1997 wird Atlantis bis zu 10-mal zu Mir fliegen, um Besatzungsmitglieder auszutauschen. Zum Start ins neue Weltraumzeitalter hat Präsident Clinton der Mannschaft an Bord der Discovery gratuliert. Das geglückte Manöver zeige, dass Russen und Amerikaner das internationale Raumfahrtprojekt zum Erfolg führen werden. Beinahe wäre das Treffen im All an einem Leck in der Steuerdüse der Discovery gescheitert. Doch die spektakulären Bilder vom Weltraumtanz der beiden 100-Tonnen-Kolosse ließen auf beiden Seiten die Probleme schnell vergessen. 400 Kilometer über dem Pazifik, 11 Meter voneinander getrennt, winkten sich die Mannschaften zu und fotografierten sich gegenseitig. Während der Fahrplan für die ständig bemannte Raumstation, die einmal so aussehen soll, feststeht, gibt es noch massive irdische Probleme mit dem Geld. Die Europäer streichen ihren Beitrag für die ESA zusammen, von bisher geplanten 7,6 Milliarden Mark auf 4 Milliarden Mark. Und im amerikanischen Kongress drohen republikanische Abgeordnete, die Weltallstation unter die Lupe zu nehmen. Und das heißt wahrscheinlich sparen. Die Russen halten trotz aller widrigen Umstände noch an ihren Weltraumplänen fest.
Spektakulären Rendezvous im Weltall hieß es heute für die Astronauten der US-Raumfähre Discovery wieder Alltag im All. Noch gestern waren sie in einem Abstand von nur 12 Metern 3 Stunden lang mit der russischen Raumstation Mir durch die Schwerelosigkeit geschwebt.
Ein ganz normaler Arbeitstag, 400 Kilometer über unseren Köpfen. Der Roboterarm der Discovery setzt einen Satelliten aus. Er soll Gase und Staub messen und uns so verstehen helfen, was eigentlich den Raum zwischen den Sternen füllt. Routine, nachdem man gestern Raumfahrtgeschichte geschrieben hat. Discovery und die russische Station Mir führten der Welt ein staunenswertes Ballett vor. Während ihre Bodenstationen den Atem anhielten, näherten sich die beiden 100-Tonner einander im rasenden Flug bis auf 11 Meter. Winkweite. Das nächste Mal im Sommer schon soll aus der flüchtigen Begegnung ein richtiger Besuch werden, mit Andocken, Crew-Austausch und gemeinsamem Training im All. Ein begeisterter Bill Clinton lobte vor allem Eileen Collins, die erste Pilotin einer Raumfähre. Ihr Beispiel, schwärmte der Präsident, zeigt allen jungen Frauen, dass man so hoch hinausfliegen kann, wie einen die eigenen Träume tragen. Als er dies sagte, waren Astronauten und Kosmonauten schon wieder ihres Weges gezogen. Ein kurzes Rendezvous nur, das aber eine lange Partnerschaft begründen soll.
By the Russian cosmonaut aboard Discovery. The satellite is called Spartan. It's to fly freely for 2 days, gathering data about the gases and dust that fill outer space. Spartan will be used later in weightlifting experiments after it's recovered, experiments aimed at teaching Discovery's 6-member crew how to handle massive objects in space. On Monday, the shuttle held an historic meeting in space, passing just 11 meters from the Russian space station, Mir.